All right, so we're live, and that means that we are on our very best behavior, right?
Nope.
I
Yes.
rebuke that.
You rebuke that. The word for
Yes.
today is rebuke. Every time someone says rebuke, what do you say?
Everybody takes a drink.
Shots.
Earlier on the Hang On, I was talking about how I don't like the word rebuke, not because we can't correct each other. It's just, it's really funny when someone stands up and goes, "I rebuke you," and you're just like, "Oh, please."
I always say it's correction done out of love is what I always consider rebuking is. I don't see it as a negative word, and I don't think Paul or anyone else in the New Testament even saw it as a negative action. Also, I think it is correction out of love. It should be that's how it should be received as I think, but yeah, some people on the internets will abuse it.
I just call it BTFO.
What does BTFO mean?
Back the F off.
Oh, you better be careful. You say all these swear words, they're not going to believe you're a Christian.
He's not. He's the Catholic.
I knew it.
Here we go.
The gentleman Barney in our group, he's in a few different communities. He's also in the moderate C word community. Barney said, "Why did you separate on your poll Catholics and Christians?" So I said because they separate each other, and it's usually not the Catholics. The Catholics don't do the separating. It's always the Reformists and Protestants that do.
We pitch a pretty big tent here in the Catholic Church. I just want to put that out there.
Quit trying to assimilate us.
Resistance is futile.
Or is that a double entendre there? Pitching a tent.
Oh dear.
Can't do one of these hangouts without him.
You know, it's interesting. The subject of alcohol did come up quite a bit in the week, and somebody was trying to rebuke me for drinking a lot. I actually don't drink a lot. Scott, how much do I drink usually?
Every week.
2 drinks a month.
2 or 3 drinks a month. Even that, like sometimes there's like dry months that go by. Yeah, so I don't drink very often. And my husband would let you know, like when I do drink, if I drink too much, he'll call me a lush and tease me to death. So, and Scott, how much do you drink?
About the same.
About 2 to 3 drinks a month, if that. So we're very moderate, mild drinkers.
That's good. I think as long as it's done in moderation, that's totally the adult way of doing it. For myself personally, I rarely do I ever drink at all. I can't stand the taste of beer. And also just alcohol in general just gives me heartburn like you wouldn't believe. So I just say, screw it, I'm not going to drink it. Every now and then, though, my wife and I will have wine on our anniversary or New Year's or, some other special occasion. But which I recommend a nice Moscato. But for the most part, though, I grew up in an alcoholic home. Both my parents, every freaking weekend, they would go out to the Moose Lodge, get plastered, come back, and have, arguments, and fight. And it was just like living through that experience. I just said, I'm never touching alcohol. Why? Why would I do that? I mean, here I am. I'm 11 years old, and I'm trying to pick up my dad out of the bathtub because he was too drunk to stand up while peeing. So who wants to live through that?
I feel there's someone I love in my life, not my husband, but we'll just leave it at someone that I love in my life that I've had to deal with recently in the last recent months with alcoholism, and it's been frightening. It's been frightening because he's truly trying to kill himself via alcohol, and then picking up something off the floor and taking care of him and stuff. It's I don't know. We ended up having to remove him from a family's house, and it was a horrible decision. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a decision I take lightly at all, and it's turned my stomach from alcohol. Like it's interesting what you're describing, because when you're dealing with that with somebody close to you, you don't want to. It's like the appeal of drinking is it's totally gone.
Yeah. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not condemning anyone who goes out and does a little drinking. For me, I mean, I did 4 years of Navy, so I've had my taste of alcohol, and I, it's not a big deal, but at the same time, it's something where I had to be extra cautious because I knew that my parents were alcoholics. The chances of me becoming an alcoholic is pretty good, and so I had to make sure that I had to keep my distance away from it. That way I didn't enjoy it too much. But I do like Long Island iced teas though. But they're something that will really mess you up though if you have one or two more, two extra ones.
Skylar, I'm having trouble getting you in the hangout. If you could friend the icon here, moderate C word, maybe I can get you in that way, because on Holy Spackle even, I'm having trouble finding you in the hangout app for some reason. Sorry about that, John.
I have to say I'm shaking my head just a little bit at your endorsement of Long Island iced teas. I come from the Ron Swanson school of alcohol, whereas if it's not brown, I won't drink it.
Mr. Skylar Fiction, how you doing?
Hey, good. How you guys doing?
Good. What brought you back to the tubes?
Probably boredom more than anything else.
Boredom.
I gotta have a place. So, like my normal life, work, family, everything like that. Like I don't get out, and I don't get much time to get out and do anything because of those things. I'm not with my family. I'm at work and blah blah blah. So, but I've got to have some kind of creative output. What happened?
I said preach.
Yeah, man. So, so I gotta have some kind of form of creative outlet, and I don't know. It's fun. This stuff is fun. I like debating and doing stuff like that. So, I'm trying to be a little friendlier at it, but I do enjoy. I do enjoy this kind of stuff. So, it's cool, man. And then like you're watching the news these days, man. It's awful. Like I started following more politics when I'm not doing this. And I think that's even more depressing than I think these debates are. Sometimes.
Yeah, it's like, let's go back to the God thing, because the world's on fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Gonna get your guns.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the topics I was thinking about all week, is doing something on guns, talking about it. I'm from Florida. That's not that far away from us, where that whole shooting happened and things like that. And we had Pulse nightclub happen last year in Orlando, which was literally like 10 minutes away from where I work. So knew people that were involved in that. So yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough down here. What's going on? So tired of it.
It's one of my suggested subjects if you want to talk about the gun situation and stuff. My only worry is that people get really heated right after shootings. I mean, really heated. And if you are pro gun like me and Jim, like we get people mauling us like we're NRA themselves.
No,
I'm in the middle. Like I hope I'm very moderate when it comes to guns, but I mean there are things that I don't want. Like I don't think we should have, AR-15s, and I don't think we should have extended clips and things like that. But like I'm all for you owning a handgun or a shotgun or a hunting gun for your own kind of thing. I just, the AR-15 was now used in Orlando Pulse. It was used in this shooting here at the school. A couple other places I can't think of right now at the moment. I think out in Vegas, I think that had happened too, and I just don't see it as a necessary gun civilians should have. But I mean, it's just my opinion. So,
well, I mean, even if they do ban it, it's not going to prevent the criminals from getting it.
I think it will a lot. I think
You're living in fantasy land.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
All right, go ahead.
Now, I've been someone who's, let's just say, throughout my life, may have obtained illegal things many times, and it's not that easy to get an illegal gun. If you're a gang member or you live in those kind of societies, but the kind of people who are attacking schools, these aren't the kind of people that are necessary. These are legal gun owners, basically. Like the people who go and do these mass shootings aren't people with background history a lot of the time. This kid had some problems, but a lot of times they haven't necessarily committed a criminal act. And I honestly don't think it will be that easy to get an AR-15 on the black market, besides the price that you're going to pay for something like that. And it's also kind of like thinking like these people are rational, like these people are logical, right? A lot of the problem is, in my opinion, is like for instance, I saw a video of this guy in Iowa that within an hour he was able to walk in to a gun shop, buy an AR-15, and walk out. An hour. Right, and that's not talking about just like
what state is that?
That's Iowa. Like, but
I don't know. I thought there was supposed to be background checks. I thought there was supposed to be background checks that take like weeks to do.
Depends on where you live. Yeah. So like, and also if it's just a gun show or something, or you're just selling it, like you have a friend who has an AR-15, they want to sell it to you, you don't do any background check. You can just sell it to them. So, like, if it's just people selling it to people, like these giant loopholes that, like, okay, you know, I get, like, people want to be able to sell a gun to a friend or a family member or something like that. But, like, it's too dangerous. Like, some guy has a bad day, some kid gets picked on or something like that. He can get access to a gun, go to school, and
whose fault is that then? I would say the parents.
No. What if he doesn't have parents?
Then in society, that's really messed up. Then,
well, it is, but there's nothing we can do. But we can make laws where we stop people from getting AR-15s legally so easily within like walking out of a store or selling it to another person.
The thing, it's not like we can just walk right in. I still don't totally buy in the whole thing about walking in and an hour later walk out with an AR-15. I think there's got to be other stipulations, but.
You could buy it from a friend right now with no stipulation.
That's true. I mean, you can if you have a friend of yours that has one. Yeah, you can probably just go to his neighbor's house and go, "Hey, can I buy this for you for $400 or whatever?"
Exactly.
And
would you be about fixing laws like that, making sure that we can't do that? That you can only buy from licensed gun dealers?
How do you prevent that?
Well,
other than you have to go and take away everyone's guns.
No, you don't have to go away and take No. You can still, it'll make it much harder for people to be able to get them, which is the ultimate goal, those kind of particular guns.
Okay, if said person goes to his friend's house and just does the deal right there, okay, how do you prevent that from happening?
Well, right now it's completely legal. They can do it. It's not necessarily about every time making sure it stops every time. It's about making sure that these people don't have such easy access to it. And in a completely legal way, at least that it's illegal, right? It's the right thing to do. Like we should only be selling through licensed gun dealers, people where they have to run background checks. Yeah. It seems like that would be a very common sense rule to make. Like, okay, well, yeah, it may not stop everyone, but at least that should be the rule that we should have I think almost everybody agrees with background checks, right?
Oh, yeah. I totally think that.
Yeah, we don't want people not to get background checks, so it seems reasonable to make sure that we just make laws saying you can't sell it. Or you go to a gun show is another way a lot of people buy stuff at gun shows where it falls under that same principle, where it's a friend selling to a friend or something like that, so they don't have to do background checks.
Right. I really don't. I mean, I'll chime in on this. One of my favorite podcasts, the No Agenda Show, which I totally recommend everyone to listen to. They talked about this yesterday about this whole gun law stuff and all that. And really, what's it going to be about? It's not going to be about more gun laws. This is going to be about stopping crazy people from getting guns. This is the war on crazy, is what this is. This is because if you look at all the past shooters, that have done, these horrendous crimes, all of them have been on SSRIs. They all have been on some kind of antidepressant that are causing, I think, some really terrible mental situations in their head where they actually have some kind of bizarre reaction where they go out and they just go nuts. And so I think this is going to be a focus, not so much on gun laws, but I think really what they're going to be doing is focusing more on making sure that people who are on some kind of medications or people who have a background of some kind of psychological or psychiatric disablement or some kind of, this kind of messed up heads, they're going to be the ones who are going to be not being able to have guns, which I totally agree. I think that that's the right direction to go. But I also feel like, I think to prevent the school shootings from happening, I think what they need to do is just simply arm the teachers. And then that'll solve the problem.
You cannot arm teachers. That's not.
Why not?
That sounds like a really bad idea.
Hey, bring it down a notch.
All right.
First of all, okay. It's not their job. There was literally a cop at that school, and he didn't go in. Right?
Yeah, I know.
And
he didn't go in. That's the problem.
Well, and logistically, I mean, and you think a teacher who isn't even trained to do this, and logistically also.
Who said that we weren't going to train them?
Can I just give a statistic?
I'll tell you, because we don't fund the education department. Where are we going to get this money? Republicans don't even want to fund.
Can I just give a quick statistic here? The hit rate for the NYPD is 17%. So about 1 in 6 shots fired by a New York cop's gun actually hits their targets. These are the best in the business. What makes you think that a teacher?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Better?
Yeah, and they don't want to. Teachers don't want to be responsible. And you think about logistical problems.
I would say so.
Now cops have got to go in, and then you just see somebody with a gun. They're not in uniform. These are just teachers. They're going to get shot. And then who knows if they're going to hit their target? They're probably they can miss, hit other children.
Well, not everybody is suited to be a marksman, right? Exactly. Not everybody.
It doesn't have to be every single teacher, but I will say there should be certain ones who are qualified to have that kind of training, who can actually handle that kind of thing. Maybe even like a certain vet who's now a teacher or something. Someone who can actually do the job and actually protect these children. I would disagree that I think teachers do want to protect the children, and they'll do whatever it takes. I mean, there are teachers who huddle over the bodies of these kids. I mean, if they're willing to do that, I'm sure if they had a weapon to defend themselves, I would have no problem with them.
It's just more guns, more guns. That in Fort Hood when they shot literally they were on a military base. And a guy was able to go on a military build. I think it was 14 people that he killed. And you're surrounded by people with guns.
Have you ever been to Texas?
Isn't more guns. You don't just.
No, you're not.
Have you been to Texas?
He was not surrounded by guns.
If you go to Texas, guess what? Everyone carries a weapon. And guess what? Everyone is cordial. You know why? Because nobody knows. I mean, everyone knows that everyone else has a gun.
Let me stop you guys right there for a minute.
All right.
Concealed carry and open carry are prohibited on all federal installations. That includes military bases. So everybody at the Fort Hood massacre was unarmed.
There was no guns on that base.
Nope.
I grew up on military bases, and there were always guns on those bases.
No, it is Army DOD policy and Army regulations prohibit the carry of lawfully concealed firearms on base.
Wait, no. I'm saying they don't have to be, but there are guns on the bases. They can get access to them.
On base.
Well, yeah, they would be in their barracks and things like that. They're going to have them.
In the armory.
There are, well, it depends on where the armory is and things like that. I mean, but they do. I grew up in the military. My family was military my whole life. I do know some of this stuff. They did have access to those guns, but even like I said, it's not.
I'm active duty.
Huh? Which branch
I'm
are
active
you?
duty. Army.
You're an Army, and you guys don't have any guns with it.
You are
Go ahead. Okay.
Private or concealed carry of privately owned weapons is prohibited on federal installations.
I'm not saying
including
privately
our
owned
military
weapons,
bases.
military weapons, like their own weapons that they hold on these bases.
You don't walk around in your daily business with a weapon. You sign it out.
No,
You check
I
it out of the
understand.
armory when you go out to the field to, you know, do your field problems and whatnot.
But you do have
Or when you're
MPs,
going out to the
right, on
range.
these
But if
bases
not,
with guns. You have MPs
that?
that carry guns. You have
Yeah,
military
those are police.
Yes, but they're
Yeah,
on the
like-
bases.
they're on the bases, and they eventually arrived and shot down Major Hassan. But I mean, look at the response time. And it was actually a civilian cop that got him, not an MP.
Wasn't even an MP. And what we're expecting is we're going to arm teachers with guns, and that's going to be effective.
Well, the
I'm not-
saying goes.
I
the
would say
saying,
so.
We might as well put security guards would be a smarter answer than
Yes.
just teachers.
I'm
that
fine
would-
with that too. But
Well, we already have
uh,
narcs, right? If we already pay narcs, why don't we just up the ante instead of paying narcs? Let's actually get security.
But
Why
no
don't-
one's
why
going
not
to
just
pay
send
for
a
it,
cop?
though. That's the problem. Is like the Republicans are not good. Like they want to talk about security things, but they're not going to pay for it. They're already
Because
defunding
your
the education
average
department.
teacher, okay, so your average shooter. I mean, as somebody that I'm not an expert, marksman. I'm sure that Jim knows more than I do. But like, as somebody that worked with the Boy Scouts and somebody that's gone plinking and trap shooting and things like that, like one of the things that they teach you is that plinking targets is not the same as an active shooter. It's just not the same situation. The stresses are different. Who's popping in front of you is different. Are you going to shoot a friendly person or an enemy? And your average person that picks up a gun and says, I need this for home defense, is not prepared for the psychological split decision, the stress, the fear, the fight or flight or freeze, all that kind of stuff. Obviously that cop wasn't prepared for that. and your average teacher probably isn't conducive to being a marksman. I don't think everybody's able to
that's why you get
shoot someone.
training.
Yeah, but why would we? They're not even going to fund teachers' pay and their own supplies, and they're gonna fund these teachers that have guns.
Okay. Look, I have a
And
solution.
think about do the math. Like how much guns you would have to buy, how many teachers buy across every school in the U.S. to be able to do that. Like the Republicans would never do it. They barely want to pay for their supplies for these students.
Why not let
Then I have a
them?
solution.
Okay.
Have the NRA fund it.
Right.
Once again, why are they going to fund it? Like, what is it? Doesn't benefit them to fund that. They don't make money off of it. They're a business.
Why not let them bring their own weapons?
I don't think. Well, if they want to bring their own weapon, I don't have such an issue with that necessarily.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's not effective.
But that-
Not
yeah,
every
well,
you're still.
How do you
you're
know?
still
It's
gonna
never
have-
been done. How do you know if it's not
You don't
effective?
think teachers ever had a gun on them when they brought it out? Like, I'm sure teachers have brought guns and not told anybody to school.
Okay, do you
Yeah, it
think
wouldn't
that a
surprise
teacher do you think that a teacher would be as effective as a New York cop at shooting a suspect?
In some cases, probably.
It depends on the background and kind of training that they've received.
Why don't we just do common sense things like stop extending clips, stop selling people weapons of war?
Because
AR-15.
criminals are still going to have all that.
That's not true. It is not.
Yes, it is
easy to
true.
get
Oh,
illegal-
no,
it is
that's
not.
true.
It is
No,
not that
okay.
easy to get an illegal gun, especially something of that
okay.
caliber.
AR-15
There's
isn't a weapon
gun
of war.
black markets all over the Philippines right now. Like there's no reason why that couldn't happen in the U.S.
Well, of course, right? Being that I'm in a border town, San Diego, I can imagine that Mexico would find a new business, and it would be gun running, and I bet it would be more lucrative than the human trafficking they're already doing, or the drugs.
You know, Mexico has some of the toughest gun laws in the world. That
Yeah,
doesn't
but-
stop the cartels.
Yeah, it doesn't stop them at
Yeah,
all.
exactly.
So how many M16s are sold on the street every day?
They don't sell M16s on the street. They sell
Correct.
AR-15s.
Right? So, yeah, on the black market, how many M16s show up? Have you guys seen statistically? Because it's illegal, people could get it, right? So how many people own M16s? Do you see?
Well, I
getting
mean,
It's
people
not
really don't
illegal.
use
It's prohibitively
M16s.
expensive. You
People-
can own a fully automatic weapon with the right tax stamp.
You don't understand what I mean. I'm not talking about, yes, if you go through all these special licenses. I'm talking about someone who doesn't have those. Since you guys' idea is that these people will be able to get it so easily, how come we're not finding all these people with all these fully automatic weapons?
And people really don't use M16s to commit massacres anyway. They'll usually use AR-15s, but I mean, even
Because you can
regardless
get
of
them. Exactly.
well, I
because
mean,
you
even
can
regardless of
them.
that,
Well,
like
Columbine didn't
most of
use an
our gun
AR-15.
murders are actually committed with handguns, with pistols.
I think the AR-15 was banned at that point because it wasn't
Nope.
till I think it was 2000. What year?
Well,
What year did you
94
saw
to
what the ban?
2004.
No,
No,
it
no,
was
it didn't happen.
worse. It was worse because the kids at Columbine had a what is it, the TEC, which was the little mini, like little sub-automatic pistol kind of thing, and it just goes like
I
that.
think
And they
those
had a
are,
shotgun. They had a shotgun in that, and they
yeah, they
took
had a
out
sawed-off shotgun. Yeah.
They took 12 people out with just that.
All legally
those little
purchased,
those little like what automatic pistols. I think those are used like in most mass shootings, even in America today, if I'm not mistaken.
And this guy, unfortunately, had a better tactic, and I think he wouldn't have been as successful as if he hadn't have done that.
Can I just mention
So,
one thing that I think it gets really underreported? It is, I think one thing that's really needs to happen is actually a reform of the background check system itself. Because every time we have one of these shootings, you always hear the politicians and the pundits talk about background checks and how we need to revitalize them. But what they do, they always make this assumption that background checks are this impregnable like blanket of security. They're really not. There have been several mass shootings that we've had in the past 5 years where the person who was the mass shooter should not have gotten that according to those state laws, but got them anyway due to clerical errors. Like that guy in South Carolina, Dylan Roof, who shot up that black church, he should not have been able to get that weapon, but he did.
Like, I just don't get why we can't have just some common sense shit like AR-15 shouldn't be on the street. Like, okay, yeah, so some people will get them, but does that mean
What's wrong with an AR-15?
Well, first of all, you can keep pulling that trigger as many times as you can pull the trigger. You can shoot a bullet in a minute. I think it's about
It's called
45.
semi-automatic. It's every time you pull the trigger, a bullet comes out. Same thing for a regular pistol.
but
if you
once
pull
again,
the trigger, it's going to come out.
Asking me what's wrong, why do we need those on our streets?
They're not on the streets. I mean,
Okay, you gotta stop taking.
Do you know how many AR-15s are in circulation?
Seriously, man. Like, I'm just saying streets. I'm not saying literally they're on our streets, walking down the street. I'm talking about it being legal.
Available.
You can walk into a store.
Do you know how many AR-15s are in circulation right now?
I
Just
know.
ballpark.
I know. I don't know what the number is, but I think it's 50% of the mass murders that have happened, and since the
About
gun
15
ban, have been
million.
by 15 million. Sure.
Do you know how many? Do you know what the percentage of of assault weapons, and not just AR-15s, but assault weapons, were used in mass shootings?
50% of the mass shootings since
14.
the ban was lifted.
14.
That's 50%. Yeah, that's 50% of the mass shootings. Since
14%.
Okay, that's still 50% of the mass shootings.
No, 14% of mass
Where are you
shootings.
getting that number?
Used
Where's your number?
semi-auto.
Where's your data coming from?
WAPO.
I'd like to see the article. I'll show you mine.
I got it from Mother Jones. Review from in 1982 through
Mother
2012
Jones.
found that 66% of the weapons were handguns, and just
Wait a
under
minute, say that again,
14%
from
would
what year?
qualify as 1982 through 2012.
Okay, and then that's not counting any of the last few years, I imagine, from 2012, when a lot of these mass shootings have happened.
Well, there've been a plethora of mass shootings.
There's
over
been tons
the
of
last couple
50% of the mass shootings that have happened since the assault ban was lifted was by AR-15s.
Okay, and how many mass shootings have occurred in the last, I don't know, let's say 5 years?
Wasn't it something we had 40 since the year's begun already?
Well, it depends.
No,
when you
that's-
say
that's
mass.
No,
So when you
that's-
say mass shooting, I guess you
It's
need to be more
inflated.
specific. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's-
what do you? So I don't understand how that changes.
Well, here's what I'm saying. Let's be generous and say we've had, I don't know, 50 mass shootings in the last 5 years. Maybe more, maybe less. What percent of that is that of 15 million?
Of course, that's a low percentage.
But so you want to ban one particular weapon
Yes.
because it's involved in half of
unnecessary.
the mass
Yes,
shootings.
because I'm not going to put the blood of our children on just because somebody wants to have a gun that they can shoot and get their rocks off with.
Okay,
You want to have
well,
home protection? Get a shotgun.
you know,
Get a
somebody
handgun
gets.
at home.
Yeah, but that'll do very little though to bring like the actual gun homicide rate down because
That's
like
not my point.
I actually think you can kill a lot easier with a shotgun. Like, I'm sorry, but if I was to,
You can't kill multiple
if I wanted,
people
if
quicker
I
with a shotgun.
maybe less people, but I can definitely make it count with a
Sure.
shotgun.
Oh,
I can
yeah,
blow
no,
a
yeah,
hole
gun you can kill
inside of
somebody
you.
with. Yeah, any gun you can kill somebody with. No, that's not the issue. It's just you be able to kill so many people in a short amount of time.
Well, I'm just saying that if a shooter shot me with a shotgun, I think I'd fare probably less as well. Than I actually would rather be nicked with an AR than nicked with a shotgun.
If you're trying to convince me to ban
It's a
shotguns, I'll go with you.
12
But,
12
like,
gauge, man.
the issue, though, is about mass shootings. Like, there's always going to be people shot and killed, like, by guns. And I am well aware of the statistics that most of the gun violence in this country happens in particular areas, mostly involved in gangs, and then the highest percentage of deaths is by suicide, by guns. Like I said, I'm moderate on guns. I'm not saying people can't have handguns, shotguns, things like that. You want to have home protection, you want to hunt, but we don't need AR-15s to be legal. We don't need semi-automatic weapons, especially so easily
By
accessible.
this logic, though, you're saying, in other words, you're saying, okay, well, if cars cause drunk drivers to kill people, then let's take away all the cars.
That's a bad analogy though, because I mean, cars can be problematic in some regards, but we need them for our daily lives to transport from point A to point B. Like, I don't really see like the need for an AR-15.
We restrict cars all the time. There's laws about how high we can manufacture SUVs because they flip and kill people. Like, we restrict cars all the time.
If you say we don't need AR-15s, go ahead and tell that to the Korean shop owners during the LA riots.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a concern to me. Like, if you're dealing with a situation where things are absolutely out of control, let's say the big one hits in California, and people are mass riots
Looting.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that. That's when an AR would become handy. Like, if you wanted to protect your family, that's when you wish you had that.
But with the riots, they were just robbing and destroying stores. Stuff's insured. Like, it's not your life isn't, his life wasn't necessarily in danger.
Not necessarily.
So,
not when they
and you
pull.
can still, once again, shotgun, handgun, all those things will still protect you and your family.
So
Doesn't
hold
need
on.
to be a killing machine.
So, but what happens though? Like the next shooting after they take away the AR-15s? What happens when some student comes in with a bunch of handguns? What's your argument going to be then? Oh, we need to get rid of all the handguns.
Listen, I'm for a multi-purpose solution with security at the schools, with having better background checks, but there are certain weapons that should not be on our streets. And the fact that
So
you
I have
guys
a
are just,
question.
like, there's no good reason besides you just like people just want to shoot them and have fun. Like, what do you think? Like, any other gun you could defend your home with?
You keep saying they shouldn't be used on, they shouldn't be out on the streets, but you haven't really given us a substantive reason why, other than a very minuscule percentage of them used in mass shootings.
No,
I'm still waiting to see what your argument
I'm
is.
sorry, I'm talking about all the dead kids that are now here because these people have access to a weapon that can kill people, multiple people in minutes.
Let me tell you,
team can kill people in minutes.
Who's this
Kids
guy?
die from a handgun fire in inner city than do in mass shootings. So what's your point?
Say that again.
There are 15.
I said more spray handgun fire in inner city gang violence than they do from mass shootings.
I was just going to make that point. In Chicago, there are 15 kids a day who probably die, maybe a week, but still, I mean, it's like a lot of people die every time from gang violence every week in the major urban areas. No one complains about that.
Chicago's like not even the worst city. Like, I think St. Louis and New Orleans have like a higher like.
You're right. Yeah, I think it was like St. Louis and Detroit. I think was another stat that I saw.
I think Atlanta's got a problem. I don't know if it's.
Atlanta has AIDS.
Okay, can we?
Oh my gosh!
Got a lot of the comedian in them.
I don't know.
So I have a question for the gun rights people. Why not just legalize pretty much everything? And I mean like fully automatic, like just balls to the wall. Why not
Well,
just
fully
have,
automatic weapons are legal. That's the thing.
they are like,
Talking about in the
Are
general
they-
sense, not in the way you have to go through the government and have to pay a ridiculous amount of money. Have your you have to give them permission to come into your house at any point. We're talking about just buying it at a gun shop. It's a
Yeah.
fully automatic weapon.
I mean, why
Why-
not just make that legal and just make it easy to get like every other weapon?
So it's just like the argument of let's legalize all the drugs. That way the problem goes away.
Why don't we answer the question
No.
first? Why don't we answer the question? Give us the answer to the question.
I mean, why not? They used to be legal.
So so you're for it. You're for selling fully automatic weapons in gun shops.
Yeah, in fact, they used to bring home their machine guns from World War I and II.
Totally
Privately
different
owned.
time. Good. How about the other gentleman? What's the other person? What's your opinion?
As far as all the automatic weapons and
Yeah.
all?
Yeah, and like
Uh,
high-powered rifles. Like,
Define high-powered
Sure.
rifle.
I don't know, like a fucking sniper rifle or something like that. Military
One
grade
that
shit.
shoots
Those are already
piss.
legal.
No. I'm not talking about them being. I heard you the first time you said that, but in terms of
No, I mean,
accessibility,
I can go to any
In ter-
rifle and buy a standard issue United States Army sniper rifle.
All right, just keep it simple then. Just a fully automatic. How about like a machine gun?
What kind of machine gun?
Jesus, don't be so dense, dude.
come on.
I mean, seriously,
No, are you talking like-
you're perfect. You're
No.
purposely being difficult in order
Are you
to
talking
escape
like
the
an M?
conversation.
Are,
Like,
are you
I-
talking
like
like
an
a,
M16 or something like
Yeah,
that?
You talking like an
a fully
M60?
automatic.
50 caliber?
the
Go
M16
around.
is an automatic?
Yeah.
It has a 3-round burst mode
You guys
and then
dodging questions like any other person I've ever heard. Can you just give a straight answer, man?
The reason
well,
that he's
because
not as
the answer is a lot more nuanced than you want it to be. And
We're talking
the
fully
reason-
automatic weapons, is what we said, like machine guns. We don't
Well,
have to
like what,
name every
right? Are we
individual.
talking like-
Give me one. Throw one out
So-
there, brother.
So are you
What's
talking
one
like a
you're
240
against?
Bravo, or
Is there any you're against having on the street?
well, are you talking like a 240 Bravo,
Any-
or are you
can
talking?
you give me any gun that you're against on the streets?
Just anything.
I'm not a gun expert. I don't know the name of every gun, and you could be a little bit more honest in your discussion. So, is there any gun?
you have dishonesty.
Huh?
Why are you accusing him of
He's
dishonesty?
being evasive to the question, and I think he understood what both me and the other gentleman were asking. He did this before when he talked about when I asked about guns on the streets, like there aren't guns on the street, like it was literal.
No, I think what he's trying to say is like there's not this flooded amount of ARs just running around.
No.
Yeah.
I just want to answer to the question that we gave earlier. That may be his point, but I'd like just a direct answer to the question.
The problem is the answer to your question is a lot more nuanced than I think you want it to be.
Can you just give me a gun that you wouldn't want on the streets legally?
And I can't really think of any.
I mean, would you want
This
like a
is-
machine gun turret, like to be like somewhere like in the
I have
public
no
square?
problem with people owning tanks. How about that? So none. It's like,
You have no problem.
Arnold Schwarzenegger owns a tank. It's pretty freaking sweet too.
Okay,
like
would
an
you be-
active tank that you can shoot with weaponry on it. You would have
Yeah,
no
well,
problem.
why people?
No, because that's not a small arm.
Well, why does it have to be a small arm in order for you to have it?
Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about small arms.
No,
here.
yeah, but we're talking about legality and what kind of arm should be legal is what we're talking about. So why do you make the distinction that only small arms should be legal?
Because constitutionally, that's what it covers.
No, that's how the courts interpret it. It just is the right to bear arms in the Constitution. It's what we've determined.
Well, let's be fair. There are a certain group of people who read the Constitution black and white, and there are people who do interpret it
Twisted.
context. You can say twisted, but there are two distinct groups of people who do that. Is that not a fact?
Well, yeah, there are people out there who think that the Second Amendment was written to give the government permission to raise and maintain an army.
But
When I needed that in the first place.
When I say people, we do have legislators who would fall into a category as those who read the letter as it is and those who interpret it. And this actually applies to more so Supreme Court justices. And I want to say Scalia fell into the former group, the ones where he reads it in the letter, like word for word, black and white. And I think he had a conflict with one of his fellow justices a few years back, not about gun rights, but about another particular issue. So I agree that this issue is nuanced, but let's not pretend that everyone reads it as literal, because we do have to take into context the climate at the time.
Well, they would have to read it literal minus the parts that are nulled by the later amendments, I would assume.
Well, obviously,
because like if you look at the original text of the Constitution, like if you find an escaped slave, like you are obligated to actually return him or her back to his or her owner. Like that was part of the original text, which was actually one of the more reprehensible parts of it.
Brother John out in chat says, out of 5 million AR owners, the total 48 mass shootings since 2004, 13 featured a semi-automatic rifle or assault rifle. 6 of those were from 2015 and 2016 alone, and considered a very low percentage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here. I think most people would just respond to that by saying that's 5 or 6 too many, right? I mean,
well, I mean, one is too many.
I agree.
I mean, quite relevant.
I feel like my question hasn't even been addressed directly in any way, right? Okay, it was pointed out that fully automatic weapons are illegal, right? But they're obviously not easily as accessible as, I guess, most weapons. So why is that the case? What was the motivation behind putting all these hoops that people would have to jump through and
to keep them out of the hands of black people?
What?
That could be a reason.
Yep. When you look at the history of the development of gun control laws, when they implemented a nationwide prohibitions on fully automatic firearms and whatnot, they copied Jim Crow laws from the South and then just made it writ large for the whole country.
Yeah, I mean, even when Ronald Reagan was governor of California, like he introduced a sweeping row of gun control laws to make sure that guns didn't go into the hands of the Black Panthers.
There you go.
Well, to be fair, blacks and Black Panthers aren't exact. I wouldn't conflate those two.
No, they're not the same category.
Well, no, me neither.
But there are probably other cases where it's true.
But I mean, you want to talk though about?
Would you guys want that to change though? I mean, would you prefer to have those types of weapons easily available, just like every other?
Well, here's the thing too, right? Well, like when people say machine guns, what you don't understand is that it encompasses a wide variety of weapons, right? Like you have things like the Browning automatic rifle, which was an infantry weapon. No, I'm not talking about Ma Deuce. I'm talking about the World War I, World War II one.
Although, okay, I thought you said M2 Browning.
Yeah, no, the Browning automatic, the BAR.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
That only had a magazine of about 30 or so rounds, and I don't know if any of you have ever tried to fire a short or a very small machine gun, but it's extremely hard to be accurate. They are not designed to take out a lot of people. They are designed to keep the enemy's head down while you bound your squad forward. Right? It's called suppressive fire for a reason. It's not called obliterative fire. Right? And when you talk about something like the 240 Bravo, which is the 249, right? It's a 5.56 automatic weapon. Right, and it's a belt-fed, man-portable machine gun. Right, those things are expensive, and they are difficult to carry. Right, you're not going to go into a school, set up shop, and then just blow everybody away with a 249 because it's not that subtle. They are going to stop you before you get in the door. They're going to stop you when you start unloading it from your trunk. because that's how heavy that fucker is.
It depends if the cops, the nearby cops, are about as incompetent as the ones in Florida.
Well, granted.
I mean, so would you say that your you guys' answer would be yes to that question?
Say that
Yes
again.
to what? Legalizing? Yeah, repeat the question again.
So what I was asking was the first question I asked was why was it that it's a little bit more difficult to get for normal people to just get their hands on fully automatic weapons. Jim gave me the reason for that, and so now I'm asking if it's a situation where you guys would be okay if those weapons became easily and readily available.
Well, you got to understand too, right? Like, if we deregulated the prohibitions on owning an M249, right? The problem is it's like so prohibitively expensive and such a pain in the ass to deal with. Like, just trying to clean the thing is
talking
difficult.
about one gun though. We're
Right.
like you really,
I mean,
Jim, you could be dodging the question really bad here, man. Like you just a yes or no answer to the question.
But when I say I don't mind the M249 being deregulated, right? It's almost a non-issue, right? Because it's such a pain in the ass to own and maintain. There would be no civilian demand for it. With a Browning automatic rifle,
I think
for
we're
example,
really referring to newer weapons. I think like the problem is like you're not really addressing the real.
He answered the question. He said he doesn't care if it was deregulated.
But we're talking about. He's talking about what would you say was a World War II gun? What year was the gun from?
The BAR.
Okay, why do we give a shit about a World War II gun? What we're talking about is modern day weapons.
Yeah, that's why he's
the capability. Yeah, but dude, the problem is like that's what I think he's trying to get to the meat of. And then we're referencing an old World War II gun. Well, yeah, this gun I'd be. Well, yeah, shit, I might be okay with that too.
Okay, Skylar, are you familiar with the Browning 1911?
No, I'm not. No.
It's one of the most popular pistols in the world, and it's from the year 1911 is when they made it. And over 100 years later, it's still widely used, widely carried, and up until very recently, it was a standard U.S. Army issue handgun.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you know nearly as much about this as you think you do.
Yeah, I've shot one when I was in the Navy.
Well, here's the thing: is I'm just asking you to answer the question, right? I didn't tell you that I knew everything about guns, but I said we were talking about modern weapons, and
hang on a second.
Bringing up an old gun that you still may be using.
Yes, I would appreciate it if you, in your ignorance, would stop accusing me of being dishonest when I clearly know what I'm talking about, and you don't.
I didn't say dishonest this time. I said that you wouldn't answer the question. And that you
bullshit! You did not. You said dishonest. You absolutely did.
I didn't say it in the last sentence I just spoke to you. And I'm saying you're being evasive. You keep bringing up old weapons. Now you're talking about. Neither
did you retract that statement. So why don't you BTFO?
Like I said, if you want to dodge questions and not actually address what's going on, and this is like he asked you a very straightforward question about modern assault weapons and whether, and you didn't answer it.
You did answer.
I rebuke you.
Rebuke me. I don't know.
Are we rebuking now?
I don't have a problem with deregulating whatever the name of the gun was. It was because, and then he went on to explain himself, which is a direct answer.
But that wasn't the question. We're talking about
specific question.
We're talking about modern
question, right?
The meat of what his question was, it wasn't necessarily specifically about one gun. We were talking about. He was talking about generally. Do you think guns should have easier access to? And we were talking about the higher level ones like AR-15s, guns like that.
So one of the questions you said is there a gun that Jim would be willing to ban? Small arms.
The question that I asked was would you be okay if it was those fully automatic weapons? If it would be easy, like, would you want for it to be easier to access those weapons? What they, how the fire rate and maintenance and all that stuff is irrelevant to me.
I would say that the laws that are currently in place are just fine. So, I mean, to make it easier to get, I mean, no, I would disagree with that. I think what we have right now is sufficient for people to get access to any kind of gun.
So I don't know about the laws being fine either. Obviously, we know that there's something wrong. I mean, I think the first school shooting, and forgive me if I'm wrong, was in 1979 with I Hate Mondays, and that was in my city. And it was with a .22 rifle.
Oh, that's what the little girl. Well, I say little girl, the skinny.
San Diego. Yeah, was it? That was San Diego, right, Scott?
Well, let's see if we could take this in a different direction. And I won't tell people what my position is for a reason. So
I rebuke that.
You can rebuke it all day. But if we're saying, okay, the issue here is that people are using weapons to hurt people, all right? Very often we see people point to other countries who don't have gun violence. What I've learned to do, and I've had many conversations while I was in the military with people who are self-professed gun nuts, that when you look at these countries, there's a different culture, there's a different climate, and I agree. I completely agree that we have a culture that is more conducive toward people owning firearms for whatever reasons, particularly for recreation or just as a hobby in general, not ever to shoot them. So are we saying that simply keeping people away from weapons will make everyone feel better? Or are we saying that if there are people who are part of this culture who are on the fringe, we want to make it harder for them to commit atrocities by just keeping everyone or adding extra barriers? So hopefully they won't commit these atrocities.
I'd go with the barriers answer. I think it's to try to make it as difficult as possible. You're never going to be able to completely stop it, but I think you could put a lot of barriers in people's way.
I think. Sorry, Ethan. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, buddy. Please.
I think that's the wrong way of thinking because these are getting more frequent, which might suggest that there's something culturally going on, which means that this is putting a Band-Aid on a problem, which has nothing to do with the ease of the access to the weapons, because the weapons have been relatively easy to access for a while. I mean, there's been differences in laws, I suppose, but it's getting more frequent. So I don't think ease of access has anything to do with that. It has. So it's like, oh, all of a sudden we really need to get rid of the guns. Why? What does that have to do with resolving whatever problem is leading people to become murderous sociopaths?
Right. There's some sort of social change, I think, that's been happening that's different. And nobody seems to be acknowledging that. Or when they do, they say ridiculous things like, put the 10 Commandments in schools or stop playing Call of Duty.
Again, it goes back to what I was trying to make a point earlier, was we're seeing a constant rise of pharmaceuticals pushing drugs on these little kids. And these drugs, whether they know it or not, they have side effects. And these side effects, and you've seen all the commercials, you've seen all the little disclaimers in the bottom. This could cause you suicidal thoughts or irrational thinking or anger issues or whatever.
What you would have to do is you would have to go through each of the cases of these mass shootings and look through the histories of each individual, and to try to find what is in common.
And they have, and all these people who have been doing these mass shootings, they're all on SSRIs. They've all been on some kind of psychotropic, depressants or antidepressants.
There's two questions which I would follow with that. First, is that the only similarity? And second, how long would each of those cases be on? Is it like from up to the point of mass shooting? It's like it's sort of like I'm sort of approaching it how you would approach to like it's a multivariable analysis or whatever you call it. Like that's a whole bunch of things with that description. But like when a doctor it's sort of a form of abductive reasoning, but which relates to statistics somehow. It has to do with disease. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So like you would try to. So it's not enough to just say, okay, well, meds. It's like, okay, well, the fact is that meds have become has the treatment of meds become more recent? If so, why? You could say there's economic causes or something like that. But like that's one whole route of an investigation you should go on. It could be it could very well be that it's not the meds themselves which are causing the problem, but the need for whatever is making it so that parents are more inclined to give their kids the meds or something. It's not like hospital. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know the whole situation, but it's not as though hospitals can just force kids to take meds unless there are laws in cases where you can. Laws in places where you can. But then for how long, right? Again, so it's a. You guys can stop me whenever you want. I'm.
No, it's. I mean, I think he's just trying to figure out, like, what has changed in society and he is right. We are very medicated, and I don't mean like to be all freaked out like Tommy Hall, like, and say, all pharmaceuticals are bad, or to say don't take your antidepressants, because I take antidepressants and I haven't ever desired to kill anybody. That's just ridiculous. But just there are some people that seem to have some interesting reactions. And also the other thing is medication during pregnancy has interesting effects too, on neurological development and stuff like that.
I'm trying to find levels of broken homes and failed marriages.
True.
Yeah,
Broken
I'm trying to
home,
look
failed
for.
marriages.
That's an explanation I favor. It's the daycare centers. That's what's doing it.
I'm trying to find specifically a side effect where it forms or I guess I say causes homicidal ideation, because I'm seeing that there's a link with aggression, but aggression and homicidal rage are two different ends of a spectrum. So I guess it's a bit dubious to just simply blame SSRIs on a lot of these mass shootings, because if that were so, I believe it would be way more frequent than what we currently see.
I think what's interesting too with SSRIs, in the defense of SSRIs, when they do, whenever you meet with a psychiatrist that is, and I say psychiatrists, don't just do your doctor, but if you meet with a psychiatrist, they're going to tell you if you're feeling worse, if you're feeling more depressed, if you're feeling suicidal, if you're feeling like rage and anger, things like that, please come see me. Something's wrong. We need to do something to change that. Not go take that out on your church with a AR.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, yeah, that's always been a thing now, at least in my experience, where even just regular physicians, like internal medicine, will ask you if you have any homicidal, suicidal ideation, just to kind of give you the once over. But to me, my position is that there are red flags from people who may have some type of mental illness that may contribute to this, and that these red flags have been missed. They've been overlooked. They've not been addressed. And I think in many of the cases that we've seen recently is that there are people who've not been on the ball with monitoring people who have been reported or who are known to, have some serious psychiatric issues. And I'm not talking about like collecting, random bits of paper, or people who just have a twitch. I'm talking about people who cannot interact with individuals without some type of conflict,
Right.
just mass, behavioral issues for years and years and years has been very well documented. And I am against just monitoring people and stigmatizing them because they have a mental illness, but I am for vigilance and I guess I'm trying to find a nice way to say this. I am for some kind of checking up, some type of system where if people are reporting you throughout the years, you may need a leash of some type.
I mean, like this last shooter, shooter, this kid had a series of problems. It wasn't just one or two incidences. This is a series of problems. If you have depression or anxiety, you don't necessarily have a series of problems. If you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you don't necessarily have a series of problems at work or at school. Not necessarily, but this guy did.
And that's where I want to, because I don't want to stigmatize people who have mental illness, because there's a slippery slope going, well, we need to just keep people who have mental illness away from guns. Well, there are a lot of people who have mental illnesses or things that are classified as mental illnesses that won't make them homicidal in the least. Anxiety, depression. Those are two mental illnesses that are very prominent in our society. That doesn't mean that those are going to have an impact, as soon as guns come into the equation. So that is something that I remain cognizant of. Yet I am unsure whether every citizen should own Modus. Now I can find, and for that's the M2 Browning. That is definitely a weapon that turns humans into Swiss cheese. If you don't know what that is, I think it gained its popularity around World War II, if I'm not mistaken. But I can find a use for that. I could say I can have fun with that. If someone wants to commit an atrocity with it, they can. They can find a very high vantage point, fire off quite a few rounds before the barrel turns red hot, and possibly take out quite a few people before they're apprehended or they kill themselves. With that being said, best case scenario here, we restrict gun usage to people who pass a stringent test. 3 massive hurdles, including psychiatric tests, including a very, very robust, gun training program, the works. If there's someone who wants to hurt people, they will find a way, I believe. And I think we've seen that with the bombings in New Jersey, where people, or the 2 kids, looked up the instructions on YouTube and constructed a pipe bomb using a pressure cooker. So for me, I would like to address the underlying problem, which is the culture that kind of breeds these people and our lack of, I guess, not surveillance, but our lack of fail safes just in case they get loose.
I got a question.
I put a link in also in the chat about some of the shooters with their medications.
Oh, Dean's been waiting. What did you want to say?
I wanted to ask a question. What would you guys say was the what's what I'm looking for? Was the intentions behind the Second Amendment? I mean, I have it pulled up here. It says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right. It was tyranny. That's what it was about. It was about when the government actually goes against you and comes to your door.
The people that wrote the Second Amendment also wrote an amendment prohibiting the quartering of soldiers in their own homes. Right. The founding fathers were very concerned about an overbearing government and an overbearing military.
Well, a little caveat, quartering homes during a time of peace. I think you are allowed to quarter them in a time of war.
And I'm gonna post a link to this page that I've been reading, but I'm just gonna read the first paragraph in terms of what they said was the original proposed or the reason behind it. So apparently, James Madison originally proposed the Second Amendment shortly after the Constitution was officially ratified as a way to provide more power to state militias, which today are considered the National Guard. It was deemed a compromise between Federalists who supported the Constitution as it was ratified, and the anti-Federalists, those who supported states having more power. Having just used guns and other arms to ward off the English, the amendment was originally created to give citizens the opportunity to fight back against a tyrannical federal government. Let me put the link in the chat if you guys want to read it.
Like, if you're reading it that way, you could say that at the very least, the federal government can't make laws regarding the rights of states to bear arms. Are you gonna you could argue that are you arguing that maybe the federal government can make laws on the grounds of individuals but not of states? So they could say individuals can't have arms, but states can raise militia or something like that. Because
no. That's not. I'm not making an argument, because this is actually the first time I actually decided to really look into this particular issue. I'm just reading what was written the first paragraph as to what was written on the website in terms of the intentions behind the Second Amendment, as in what it's supposed to do, because it definitely makes sense, and that if you fear that the federal government could have so much power to the point where they can literally become tyrants, then the people in that situation should have a right to bear arms, right? But I think it says in the form of militias. At least that's my whole point of it, anyways. So whether or not I don't know if it means as individuals or as a collective, because militias are legal in the United States, right?
Yeah, there's several militias. In fact,
Yeah.
you know what's strange is California has tons of militias, which is weird to me. You wouldn't think so, but there's a lot of red voters in California that people don't know about, and they're in like the Central and stuff. And there's a lot of militia people
People
there.
don't know
Seriously,
about.
like you know that like there's gonna be like if the big one hits and like they're like California's falling into the sea and everything's devastated. You know that these guys are gonna sync up and like there's gonna be certain counties that you can't pass through because they're gonna be so armed.
Like sundown towns. But no, I was reading
Uh-huh.
the I was reading the link that John had put, and I see what I think Holy had said it, that, or somebody else might have said it. There's seems to be a correlation where individuals are taking some type of psychotropic drugs, but there's no real indication that they were taking their prescribed medication. They're taking more or less, or not, or just stopped taking it at all. And at least to say on one of the cases
Right.
that some of them had something that they weren't supposed to have. I think it was Seroquel. But and that's kind of where I said there's a slippery slope of just saying, well, these people were taking drugs, a particular type of drugs at the time, and this, may be the cause. Well, if we boil that down even more, all of these people were mentally ill. So how do we know even without the drugs, like they would have committed these acts? And so I think that to me edges on something a little bit too dangerous, because from there we can surmise that since these individuals are at base mentally ill, then mentally ill people should then not have these weapons.
Well, if you
There's-
I would say I think the only issue with that is that if someone is depressed and he goes to get his, let's say these laws are put into place, right, and he goes to the third step where he needs to get his mental health checked, right, medication and all that stuff looked into, and let's say the psychologist at the end of the day looks at him and say, hey, I don't think you're stable enough to own guns. Aren't we essentially putting all that power in the hands of a few people in regards to who can own and who shouldn't
I
own
don't
guns?
think someone who's stable and who isn't stable enough to own guns should be stable enough to like be out of inpatient. like if you're that bad, I mean, like, okay, I guess that's not necessarily the case because it's like kids are a bit different, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if yeah, I never mind. That's wrong. That's wrong.
I would just say, how are we going to here's the problem with the whole medical thing, and I'm not necessarily against. Obviously, I don't think mentally ill people should be getting guns, general. But like, how are we going to enforce this? Like, how are we going to test it? Yeah, maybe if something criminal happened, we might be able to get some kind of. But if
have some kind of cross-platform when it comes to the HIPAA laws, along with background checks. I mean, put some kind of connection.
How do you detect it? Like, that's what I'm trying to get. Like, so how would the state, the government, know that somebody was unstable mentally to own a gun?
I mean, medical history.
Just look at medical history.
Like that. The problem with that is that, like, well, how are you going to define mental illness on a legal level? Right?
That's the thing. That's the problem. Is that there are a lot of people who are totally fine and can totally function just fine on some kind of antidepressant, but or they can just say, oh, gee, you're acting really irrational. You must be crazy. And so therefore you can't have a gun. I mean, they have to define it to a certain way where nobody can get a gun.
And
they can.
And who's going to test? I mean, is there going to be a test? Like, is there going to be someone that you don't get a medical evaluation before buying a gun? Because I can guarantee the conservatives will never pass that. Like the Republican Party will never in a million years pass that. So,
and to be honest, I don't think a law like that
really passes anything with regards to guns.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, so like the old, like the as much as we'd all like them to do some kind of mental background check, like it just isn't going to happen because they're never going to pass it.
Yeah, I don't think it's feasible, and I think it's also a slippery slope. So those are basically my two reasons for staying away from it. But any measure that we try to implement, that is a form of gun control. So we're kind of back to square one with this. Like even if we buy the concept that people who are taking these psychotropic drugs are prone to shootings, well, we would have to enact gun control in order to stop that.
Exactly, and not enough politicians are willing to do it. I mean, I'm actually kind of surprised because down here in Florida, the governor, Rick Scott, who's a really right-wing conservative, he's looking into banning bump stocks, and what was the other thing he's looking at? He didn't say assault weapons specifically, but he kind of hinted towards it.
Well, I think there's. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's it. No, I was just saying. I'm actually surprised. And Marco Rubio was saying he was even willing now to consider extended clips.
Assault weapon.
So, and I want to talk about that. So, when we use these terms, assault weapon, I think there needs to be
category.
It's there you can classify things as an assault weapon. I mean, just there's a colloquial use, and then there's I guess you call it an esoteric use for what can be considered an assault weapon. Because generally, any rifle that I've had, any carbine that I've ever touched, they have three modes. They have semi, they have automatic, and then they have fun mode. So depending on what mode you put it on, it could fit in any one of those categories. So I think we have to be very careful with how we define these things going forward.
Assault is an adjective when it comes to assault weapons. Unless you're speaking about assault rifles, the category is just meaningless. And if that gets into the laws, people can end, like semantics comes in. It just becomes, oh, look, we can squeeze the yay. It's like, that's something you don't want to let get into a law. Like that's
I think the law that Bill Nelson down here is trying to pass would ban about 2,000 guns.
Well, and that's the kind of the thing that I'm a bit dubious about. So, and I brought up the M2 Browning Modus for a reason, because it's belt fed. So, should we start with weapons that are used to effectively mow down entire squads, or are we after individual rifles and carbines that can be altered to become fully automatic?
Yeah. I would say mostly the ones that you can maul down. I think if you can shoot 45 to 50 bullets out of a gun and then have a clip that's large enough to hold that many bullets, I think there may be some consideration that needs to be made.
Like for me, like I guess I don't really have much of an opinion on this stuff. I lean towards no restrictions whatsoever. Kind of, well, not that's extreme, but like no, don't change the law as it is now. Is okay with me kind of idea. But if there were going to be laws, I would avoid the term. I fear legalese because you can mess with semantics around with that, and I don't want lawyers to have that power. But if we were to use terms like belt fed instead of assault weapon, I would be fine. It's like, okay, this is a very specific phrase which is being used here, which is belt fed, and it's like, it's like certain types of bullets might be prevented or something like that, or very specific guns. Like this is the specific gun, not some random type of gun where the definition of that type of gun is completely ambiguous and consequently, I don't know. That's all I'm saying. I'll shut up.
I definitely see what you mean by that, because I'm going a bit of a tangent, but when you look up what was that, the castle laws and stand your ground laws, they're different. What's different is that the use of the word habitation changes depending on how it's defined in, like you said, legalese. And that's something that we examine in my Texas government class, because Texas defines habitation differently than Florida. So if there is a law that's going to be enacted, you have to actually define what assault means specifically in this context before you try and enact a law. Because like you said, there is going to be an issue where if you have this kind of just general or generic definition of what an assault weapon is, and it's just alluded to that it's something that can either be semi or fully automatic, then there's a lot of weapons that can be modified, and there are a lot of ones that can be modified to not do that. So there's a huge gray area given the versatility of certain weapons. And I think that's a finer point that needs to be expounded upon more. But if we're going to have a conversation about maximum damage per weapon, we should probably stay with the belt-fed weapons. And I wanted to get some input on everyone else as to what they feel about, just kind of just shifting the conversation to more so belt-fed weapons and not just, carbines and just, rifles.
How
Well, I think the issue when you're discussing,
illegal? I don't like when you say belt-fed weapons. Like could you name a couple that are legal right now that we could, like, someone could buy?
I honestly have to look them up.
Well, is there quite a few? Like, is this something where like hundreds, thousands, or like a few different ones? I mean, I don't expect you to know all this off the top of your head by any means.
I mean, the recent ones that I could think of, like a 240 Bravo, I know is belt-fed, but I'm not sure if civilians can get their hands on it. Like Jim or John may know more about that.
I think Jim's point comes in here. It's very likely that belt-fed weapons, you don't even need restrictions because they're going to be like really big guns.
well, and the 240 Bravo is a crew-served weapon by definition, which means it requires more than one person to operate.
Right, and so that's why I wanted to use belt fed. I should have said crew serve. Thank you, because you need an AG gunner to help feed that belt in there because the links will get caught if you don't have someone next to you feeding it and making sure that the there's not a bump in the clip. There's a name for it. Shit, it's God damn it! Come on, Jim, help me. It's when it bunches up. God damn it!
I just call it a stoppage.
Stop it. Yeah. Basically a kink. So because it comes out of a drum, right? It comes out of a drum, and when you, as the AG gunner, you have to expand it, make sure it's not necessarily taut, but you have to make sure that your left hand is feeding it to the weapon, and that your right hand is steadily pulling it, but there's the same amount of distance between each hand. So there's actually, you have an active job in trying to feed that weapon properly, or it will jam and you will be fucked. So I say this because I've done this. Even as a medic, I've been an AG gunner. Those are the sort of weapons I think that we should probably focus on. And I'll share a screenshot so people can actually see what I'm talking about rather than me trying to describe it.
Furthermore, when you're talking about a small arms machine gun, and as I've already said, they're not very accurate. I mean, Drag, you fired your M4 or M16 on 3-round burst, right?
Yeah, easily.
How easy was it to stay on target?
It's pretty easy because there's not a lot of kick with that. But I've been to the range with the infantry and I fired a 240 Bravo, and the one of the on-site senior NCOs actually yelled out, who the fuck isn't keeping that weapon down? And it was me, because I was having a hard time watching for the tracers to see where my line of sight was.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to like the M4 on burst mode, right? Like, you're going to empty that mag quick fast, and you're not going to engage a wide variety of targets with an M4 on burst, right? I mean, you're going to go through that thing in about 3 to 5 seconds, and you'll maybe engage, I don't know, 2-3 targets at most,
if that.
Because
go ahead. I'm trying to get this.
So when you're talking about things like, say like the Browning automatic weapon or a Browning automatic rifle, again, it's going to be the same effect, right? I mean, it's not like you're going to be able to go down the hallway and just mow down a whole lunchroom full of people, right?
No,
you're going to expend those rounds quickly, and you're not going to be able to do it very effectively.
If somebody can hold that weapon and and I have a picture here of 240 Bravo being fed. If someone can hold this and aim it accurately, they're ready to die. Like they're capable of quite a bit.
You are also a much better marksman than I.
Yeah, because what's going to happen is, and a lot of people, if you've not shot this weapon, you don't know it. That tip there that you see, that's kind of perforated, it'll turn red, and then once it starts turning white, it'll melt. So you're supposed to fire it, and I forgot what you're supposed to say. There's a saying that the infantry have for how long you're supposed to shoot it, but like 4 to 5 seconds, that's it. Give it a little
You
break.
basically, the time it takes you to say to yourself, "Die, mother effer, die, mother effer."
Yeah, okay. Actually, no, that's what it die, motherfucker, die. And so then after that, after you say it, you stop firing because you'll start seeing that thing turn white. Once it melts, you're fucked. Like you have to replace the barrel. And again, that takes time because it's hot.
That's why the assistant always rolls with the spare barrel, so you can swap them out.
Yeah, and so this is what I was talking about. He's on the other side of the guy. I usually on the right side. I don't know why, but you see, this is how the weapon has to be fed. And I think that, okay, well, having a restriction on certain weapons like this, sure, but unless somebody has a pretty good teammate who's ready to go down with him, then but then I'm not sure how many gunmen we've had that have tried this and been effective.
But Drag, to be fair though, like, yeah, I mean, yeah, we shouldn't have guns like that only go on the street too. But two of the largest mass shootings in our country, one here in Orlando Pulse, right down the road from me, and then the Las Vegas shooter, and then this new the Parkview wasn't one of the larger ones. All with an AR-15, because this gun has become so culturally popular, basically. Like it seems like when a gun like that is used in a mass killing, like two of the largest, like maybe we should consider maybe not giving access to everybody or making it a little stricter. So stricter rules.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm willing to buy that. Well, just for argument's sake. So
sure.
It is a very popular gun. It's so popular that my cousin, the police officer, he owns one, and I've actually held it. The popularity of the gun is based on its versatility and its effective firing range, from what I understand. Because like I said, I don't own it; he owns it, and I just talked to him about it. The fact that it was used, I don't think it's a testament to any type of well, it's really hard to articulate this.
Effective.
It's effective, but that effectiveness also just so happens to make it more prevalent within the population. So I don't think it's an issue that if people stop buying it now, the next best thing will simply replace it. So my question would be then, if I were to buy this, or buy this assertion, where does the buck stop?
I would say anything similar enough to it that can shoot that many rounds and has that kind of accuracy.
That's ambiguous. I understand that
specific. Actually, yeah. Go ahead.
The problem is the law part, right? The reason I point the ambiguity is that I understand what you're trying to get at in a sense, but the question is can that be put into a law which people can't mess with legalese? And I don't think it's possible.
I think maybe you could limit guns to shoot a certain amount of bullets per minute, possibly.
That actually might work. So never mind.
How?
Huh?
How?
No, I'm saying
the AR-15 doesn't.
Well, you make a law, and then if it shoots more than this amount of bullets in a minute, it can shoot. If it has the capability to shoot more than X amount of bullets in 1 minute, then it's illegal to sell.
Isn't the AR-15 like single burst? It's just like pow.
Yeah, but you could. But I said shoot. That's what I'm saying. You could shoot. It's literally you can put as many times as you can pull that trigger in a minute, it will shoot. So average, I from what I understand, it's 45 to 50 bullets.
Yeah, well, in that case, you're probably you're gonna end up having like pistols being included in that kind of.
No. That's we're talking about without reloading. Like you'd have to reload a pistol.
Oh, okay.
You can.
Well, yeah. Then you would make laws in mags instead.
Yeah,
you would say.
Exactly. Well, yeah. Then I would limit magazine sizes also. Like one of the key things, and this is something Marco Rubio, a conservative, was talking about. If anybody got a chance to watch the CNN conversation with the students and some of the politicians, but there was actually a very key moment where and that's what's kind of making Marco Rubio change his mind about clip sizes, where if this person hadn't had such a large clip, that probably a couple of people would have been alive still. They'd have saved a couple of lives because he would have had to reload, and these people would have had time to escape and run away.
Disagree. I can change a mag pretty fast, and I am by no means a
We're
extraordinarily
also
skilled.
military, and this is what they're saying. Like I said, this is Marco Ruby talking about the police force and what they're saying.
Yeah, that's why I said like you wouldn't make it. The law would be based on the magazine itself, not on the firing speed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could do both. Well, yeah.
If you did both, though, then you have the problem of that will include too many guns. Like you
I see what you're saying. That's fair enough. You could probably limit the clip sizes to. And then I think too, so maybe some common sense things would be like a longer waiting period, maybe a couple more extensive things on the AR-15 or.
So the waiting period thing is, I don't like the waiting period idea because what that can be used to is that could cause a decrease in the demand for guns because people just won't want to spend the time, and as a consequence, that will mess with the gun industry, and that could be like leeway time for people to kind of make people like guns less and sort of attack the American spirit, as it were.
Well, that's not the American. It's not to do with the American spirit. I mean,
guns are all. America's all about guns. Guns.
And that's probably what the problem
is.
That's part of the cultural problem that we're having. Like, there's a reason why these guys use AR-15s, right? There's a gun culture. People are so extreme now.
What is the reason? Because it looks military? Because it looks mean?
Yeah, because it looks mean. I think it's because it's like we said here at first, you can shoot a lot of bullets very quickly. It's accurate. It looks like a military gun, right? Like the Republicans and conservatives have been talking about for years. They're so afraid the government's going to come take away their guns. Like, and it never happens.
And then there was a surge of purchasing those guns.
Like Obama got elected, and it's like we have a huge surge. And then in that industry, look how much influence the NRA has. Like, we're talking now, people who are pro-gun rights, right, are not moderates anymore. Like, I'm a moderate. I'm proposing moderate. I'm saying people should have handguns. People should have shotguns, hunting rifles. I don't have a problem with people having concealed carry and things like that. Like, that's a moderate position. And now what's happening, you're going to be super liberal and you don't want any guns, like completely bad at all, right? Or what particularly basic conservatives and pro-gun people are now, which is like that's what I was trying to get with the point. I was a little harsh on what's his name, Jim, and I shouldn't have called him dishonest. But the thing is that like they're not willing to ban anything at all. And we make up these lies, like we argue lies, or we try to make up all these reasons. Well, it won't stop the killings. It won't do this. It's like, well, we haven't even tried it. Countries like Australia have done it and been very, very successful. The UK did it. Japan has a ban on these things.
I'll let you know also, though, it's not going to change as far as violence go, because actually back in 2015, China, which has no guns for the citizens, they had an all-out stab fest. They had a whole bunch of people with knives going around and stabbing a bunch of people. I mean, it's not guns are not the problem, or weapons are not the problem. It's the people that are the problem.
But the problem is we can't regulate people. That's the problem.
Well, like you can try to make cultural changes. So it's yes, you can't regulate people.
Well, the government. What's the government going to do? Like, what do you expect the government to run a propaganda machine and try to get?
You don't appeal to the government. You use other means.
Well, but the problem. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Here's the thing, though. This is why. Here's my issue. I would understand that this saying that says, guns don't kill people. Guns are just tools, right? But it's a tool that at the end of the day, it wasn't invented for fun. Tools specifically to kill people or kill stuff, right? And so it's very effective at doing so. Now, I mean, a dude who wants to run into a classroom to try to stab people to death. I mean, sure, he might take down maybe 2 or 3 people, right? But a guy with, maybe 1 or 2 handguns or rifle, he can take down quite a lot of people before he himself is taken down. So that's the difference there. I would say that. It just seems like it's a situation where most people want it to go to the extremes where they're saying, ban guns outright. I personally don't hold that position. I actually think guns are really, really cool. Just say I like them.
Oh, guns are fine. Like it's
However,
like there's nothing wrong with having a gun. Like it's I just think there needs to be more. I think common sense in the middle thinking in this country. Like we've got to meet in the middle, figure out to work out this issue. And both the liberals and the conservatives are so on their opposite sides now.
Right. There's these extreme views, and Fiona was asking, why do we jump to confiscation? You can't take my guns, and from my cold dead hands, kind of flipping out. And I was trying to say, well, that's because of the Dianne Feinsteins of the world that really are for all banning guns. It's just straight across the board. And watching
the New York Times.
Yep. And watching what happened in Australia and stuff. Australia is so different than us. They don't have Mexico feeding in to them the way we do. New Zealand's not there trafficking from the nearby, like Malaysia or whatever, bunch of drugs and human trafficking and stuff. Here, like we have, South American, mobs that are trafficking through Mexico, drugs, human trafficking, all sorts of stuff like that. And do you think that they're not going to gun run? Like we're not the same as Australia. There's no way.
I don't necessarily even relevant, because even if that issue didn't exist, having this much guns available, you'll run into the same issue. Still have gangs that are going to have a ton of guns. You'll still have shootings in urban areas and mass shootings at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day,
I think one of the major things though we've got to get rid of is this thing where you could just sell a gun to anybody if you're selling it person to person. That's got to go. Like we can't have a situation where like you can go to a gun show. Like there was literally a video. It was the funniest thing on YouTube. Kids like he looks like a teenager. He's 18, but he looks like he's like 14 years old. And he goes to buy cigarettes, and they're like, "No, get out of here, kid. You're not buying no cigarettes." And he tries to go buy alcohol. Everybody laughs at him every step of the way. He tries to do he tries to buy porn and all this stuff. Homeboy goes to a gun show. Sees like a big ass AR-15. He's like, "Yo, I want to buy that." And the guy starts literally, "Oh yeah, it's totally cool. Yeah, man, fuck the government," and just sells them.
An AR-15. It was a 22 rifle.
Oh, you saw the video.
Those are good for shooting squirrels. I know. I've seen the video too. It wasn't an AR-15.
But you understand that if it was an AR-15, he could sell that AR-15 legally.
But it wasn't.
Okay, but he can, correct? Under the law, he could just get. He doesn't have to do a background check. Doesn't need to do any of that. He could sell them and legally buy that AR-15. Yes.
Is that the law? Like I really don't know.
I did a background my Soviet surplus rifle left over from Stalingrad.
You did a back. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I bought a rifle, old Soviet surplus rifle that saw action in Stalingrad back in the 40s. Show? No, but it was from a private seller. I had to do a background check.
You don't have to do one at a gun show.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, absolutely.
So you can sell peer-to-peer.
I don't think that's the case in every state.
I guess it depends on the state, but really, I guess that's probably what we're talking about, the differences.
Yeah, I don't think you can do it in California, but I know that the laws in the southern states are quite different than here, like Texas and Florida.
Very different.
So I don't know. That is interesting.
I posted an excerpt about that kind of generally explains New York and state laws, and it's pretty strict. And I mean, especially in New York City, it's almost impossible to be like a normal civilian to get a gun.
New Jersey's the same thing too. Yeah, I heard it's like impossible.
Yeah. So my take on gun control is that not gun control in itself isn't a bad thing if you mean having requirements and restrictions, education, tests. I don't think that's a bad thing. But when it jumps to confiscation or relegating people only to shotguns, which is stupid. Shotguns hurt. Are you kidding me? Go shoot a shotgun. Ouch.
Yeah.
You know, forget it. I don't like that. like that to me is really dumb. And the Joe Biden, wasn't it Joe Biden that said that? And like, a woman just get to get a shotgun. And I'm like, yeah, well, if you want to lose your shoulder, you know, like, great.
Right.
Everyone should own guns.
I don't think everybody
There
should
will
own
be
guns at all. I think there's a lot of people that can gauge themselves and know that they're not good for it. Maybe they have rage issues, or maybe they are depressive and they have suicidal idealizations and stuff like that. Like, you can kind of gauge for yourself if it's not appropriate, or if you know.
Right.
I knew someone that was going to be a cop, and then when she was going to train to be a cop, and in her training, she came to this realization, when it came down to it, she might not be able to kill somebody. She really had no desire to kill anybody. And she thought, if it came down to it, I probably would freeze and get myself killed.
I would say the bottom line, for me anyways, and then I'll probably step out because it's getting late. Everyone has, according to our Bill of Rights, we have the right to life. Okay, we all have this right, and a part of that is to be able to defend ourselves, and which is one of the reasons why we have the Second Amendment. But ultimately, in the end, though, when somebody else read the Second Amendment, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And then here's the last part that a lot of people don't want to seem to say or to expound on. It says, shall not be infringed. So even if we have to go to the extremes of complete gun control, we still have that right. And the Bill of Rights is not something, it's a piece of paper that gives us the rights. This is inalienable rights. In other words, these are rights that we are born with. We have the right to defend ourselves. But I'm not trying to make a case that everyone should have a gun. I think it's anyone who feels they can handle a gun. Okay, in a respectful and responsible way. But the bottom line is, if it really comes down to it, Congress, our government can just go ahead and ratify this amendment. It is possible, but it takes 75% of the votes of our government. So, I mean, if it gets to the point where we have to change it, it's not an impossibility that we can get rid of this Second Amendment. But at the same time, it conflicts with the right to life and the right to defend ourselves.
Quick question before you go. What if it's a situation where it's gotten to the point where the shootings they keep ramping up, happening and more and more. And let's say, for example, that there's no specific common denominator between these people, right? Let's say they had a beef. One person might be mentally ill. One person just decides one day, say, screw it, I'm just going to go and kill a bunch of people. Like, what if it keeps getting worse and worse? Would you say that something should be done? I mean, obviously not banning guns, because like I said, I think guns are awesome. But do you think that something should be done?
Well, I've mentioned it before, but a lot of you guys didn't agree with me. I think if the shootings do continue and they can't seem to find a solution when it comes to making more laws or more restrictions, then obviously we're missing something. And so what we need to do then is go ahead and actually train, not every single teacher, but I would say train those, or have security guards within the at the schools to arm them, and we need to have some kind of a counter defense. We need to have something where teachers or security guards can defend the school to the point where sometimes you have to fight fire. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. So
I'm not just talking about schools though. I'm just talking about in general, because mass shootings can happen in almost any location where there's a ton of people.
Yeah, I know, but right now that's what the big headlines are: is the schools.
Screw the headlines.
Yeah, and I want to point out, I did look up the law about the gun shows, and it's totally not. It's so the only time that they are required is if you're a licensed seller. So in a gun show, if somebody isn't a licensed seller, what's the term? Or if you're an unlicensed seller, which means you sell a couple of arms, you can do it. It's not federally illegal. So probably, Jim, what you do is you probably bought from a licensed dealer at a gun show.
Can you sell at a gun show if you're not a licensed dealer?
Yes.
Federally, can you?
There's no federal law saying that you can't do it at a gun show.
Interesting.
It's in fact, I'm surprised you guys haven't heard of it. I mean, it's called the gun show loophole.
Oh, I've heard of it. It's a myth.
I've heard of it, but I don't know anybody that's used it. That's the thing, but I don't know if that's because it's in state.
That any firearm purchased at a gun show was used in violent crime.
Let's see here. In 1980, over 4,000 gun shows were conducted around the country. 470 were held in Texas alone. Let's see here.
Tyler's mentioning that you have to pay seller space at gun shows that cost thousands of dollars for a booth space. Yeah. It's not like it's just like, hey, bud, come here. How would you like to buy a couple of Glocks?
Want some guns? First one's free.
You could literally sell a gun to another person without even doing a background check. Like, this is what I'm talking about. This is a common sense thing. We could stop this
at a gun show.
At a gun show. Like, we could stop this, and people who are for gun rights won't even no, we're not gonna do this either.
Commercially,
so these gun shows, they're advertising these, right? I mean, they want to draw in customers, right?
I don't know what that
why aren't we stopping them? Why aren't we just going through and saying the cops, or either have some kind of federal presence there to actually say, okay, you want to buy this gun? Walk over here to this table and get federally background checked.
Because
how hard is it?
There's no
it's not illegal. They can sell it without a background check. It's not federally illegal for them to sell it.
Well, there's that, and even if the federal government wants to take that route, one, the policies are not in place for it, and two, the funding is not in place for it. So even if they want to do it, they wouldn't be able to do it. And I think it's also a situation where I think having a license to kind of everyone having that license, being forced to present that all the time, and during the purchase, whatever weapon that's purchased is that ID is locked on to that person's profile, and so you know where that gun is going. Even if this particular person sells that gun to another person, I think that sale should probably be done in a gun shop or something to transfer over the papers. I'm pretty sure there are states that have those laws.
Yeah, just to add on what Scalar was saying.
Have that.
Just to add on what Scalar was saying, you can buy guns like that from people, but those are basically for only long guns, which would be like shotguns and bolt-action rifles. You can't buy pistols or semi-autos. Those you have to register through the police department, and basically you have to get a background check from buying, even from your family member, and transferring a gun like that. But shotguns and rifles and black powder rifles, you can sell.
Interesting.
Furthermore, if you were to sell a private collection at at a gun show, like the prices you would have to pay just to get a booth, and you go through all the ATF's regulations and licensing fees, would make it, cost prohibitive. You get a loss. I mean, you would be selling all your stuff at a loss if you were to sell at a gun show, because you're not going to be able to sell them at market value. There's no way.
I mean, I wouldn't add.
The point is just like, why can't we just get rid of something like this without people who are for, like, people on the right that want complete, like, no gun regulation at all? Like, it's craziness.
Well, because I don't see a reason to get rid of it.
Yeah,
Right?
this is exactly my point. The people who are this pro-gun, and it's not just him, it's a lot of the people. It's like there is no middle ground. It's just you'll have an excuse.
Uh-oh. That his battery might die, so.
Yeah, I was writing.
Just so you guys know, Skylar was not kicked. It just was bad timing. Yeah, he said his battery's low. I think he just lost.
I was about to write him in a side chat that if he doesn't at least attempt to charge his battery, he is party to assisted suicide.
So I think
can there be well, anyone who knows, can there be auctions at gun shows? Because that could be a way around whatever Jim was talking about. Can you auction?
Well, yes, you auction stuff, but you can even go on online auctions. But the guns have to be shipped to a licensed firearms dealer, and you have to go to that licensed firearm dealer and do a background check before you receive it.
Yeah, if you're going to buy a gun online, it has to be shipped to and picked up from a licensed firearm dealer who legally has to conduct a background check, or the ATF eats them for lunch.
Is there a limit? Go ahead, Drax. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think on Skylar's point, it segues into something that I wanted to bring up earlier in the conversation, which he touched on a bit, and I want to expound upon the dialogue itself. It's a bit of a meta discussion. I have found that in the recent months, and I say recent months like last semester, that there is a breakdown in communication when quote unquote controversial topics such as this comes up. Another example that we used at the time was immigration. There is a need on all sides, all parties, for some type of solution for the problem. I don't think there's anyone here that will just straight up deny that there is an issue at some level, right? But what tends to happen is that there's a trading of talking points rather than a conversation about the facts of the matter. There are barbs and quips that kind of come along with that. So the solution was put forth that instead of people just having what they think to be a debate, or they think to be a civil discourse, you have what's called a deliberative dialogue. And a deliberative dialogue is basically a discussion hosted by a facilitator, or I guess you could call him a mediator rather, that is somewhat familiar with the topic, but the topic is guided. People just don't kind of latch on to whatever point, and then it's a little bit less organic than just having a free-flowing conversation, because what tends to happen is that we go on tangents. That being said, I think this conversation would definitely be more fruitful if we had a deliberative dialogue and everyone had I guess a guide sheet to go by, and that we condense down all the possible positions one can take with this issue, and that we deliberate each and every one of them systematically, so that we can kind of come together and see where our differences are and where our similarities are, and then kind of move forward to continue having a productive conversation.
Yeah, but here's the issue. I think it stems from the parties, whereas you'll have one group of people are like looking at things from one particular perspective, and for whatever reason they refuse to compromise. It's funny because most politicians, and I mean, I don't agree with McCain on a lot of stuff, but he has been saying some really true words in regards to, it seems that people have forgotten that, one, you don't serve the party, you serve the country. Two, the greatest part of our democracy is compromise, right? So even if you are the party in power, it shouldn't necessarily mean that you should ignore the party or the other people who don't share your belief, right? Because what should come first are Americans, and there are Americans that don't share your beliefs. Also, I think there's an issue in regards to the rise of nationalism. If someone's going to sit here and say that that's not the case, there are plenty of Republicans who've noticed that within their same party, right? I think that's the other thing that's getting out of hand too. And so most of these guys don't want to have conversations, whether it's people on the right or the left. So
do you want to hear an expert? Sorry, I thought you'd finished.
I think the first thing that we have to do, and I completely agree with Drag, is that the people who are up top have to decide for themselves to come together and say, okay, it's okay to have a dialogue. The people come first, and regardless of your position, we should come up with compromise in the way how we craft laws and policies. Go ahead, Simon. Sorry.
No, it's cool. I thought you'd finished. Sorry. Yeah, no, I just thought, I'm an external view. I don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. And yeah, having listened to you now for whatever, a couple of hours, hour and a half, whatever, it strikes me as two things. Firstly, the decision has been made to have weapons, so that's the first thing that should be stated. If the society is going to have weapons, then of course the discussion of the limit must also be had, and to avoid having that discussion seems to me dishonest. Then the second thing is that the school shootings in relation to that, I think, although that might be a driver to have the discussion should be had anyway. So therefore, it shouldn't be based upon the school shootings necessarily, unless a link can be found to show that there's a direct connection between these particular weapons and the act of school shootings in the first place. And that might be a reason to then ban weapons wholesale. But other than that, I don't think that's possible to do. And you have to really look at it from a Star Trek kind of perspective, and what would data do, right? We've got to go through the cases, the individual cases of the school shootings, to find commonalities and then investigate those commonalities. So in this case, for instance, if there's a question being raised for abuse of SSRI drugs, then certainly tests should be done on those drugs to find out if coming off the drug endangers people and makes people more homicidal, or overuse of the drug does that. Right? And that might be a genuine case for why the school shootings have gone up, but that's not going to be taken just because they're school shootings, because it's an assault weapon, whatever assault weapon may mean. So those are the two kind of points, really, is that you need to have the discussion really on the basis that weapons are accepted, and therefore limiting weapons is only to be done for solid reasons, i.e. reasons which are not to do with emotional, because school shootings happen. Unless you can demonstrate that link, then you've got no reason to be basing law upon that. And I would certainly stop. I mean, from my perspective, of course, I wouldn't want people that have known mental issues that are on medication to be able to carry guns in the streets or get hold of guns like military grade guns, because they wouldn't be involved in a well-run militia in the first place. But that would be my reason for it. Go ahead.
Tyler was mentioning how state laws vary from state to state, and it's true. There's a lot of laws about like knives, for instance, in California. Like you can't have a very long knife, or if you have like a hunting knife, or like a nice buck knife, or oh my gosh, what's the Marine one that everybody has that I don't have? K-bar. The K-bar. Yeah, you have a K-bar or whatever. Like they're like, oh, you have to kind of use it as like transporting one thing to the other and in your trunk, and they have all these weird rules about it. And if you go to Arizona, they're pretty liberal about guns compared to, or not liberal, I'm sorry. They're more open to guns than California, but in Arizona, they ban crossbows. Crossbows are illegal in Arizona. I'm just saying. So like, it's really interesting how when you go state to state, the laws vary. So part of the problem in the US is because we go state rights, you really can just go ahead and cross the border, and all of a sudden you're in a new world where the way that you would purchase, buy, or carry guns is different. It's different each state. And I think that's maybe what might be different than some of the European countries, because you guys have such a smaller pool to I don't mean that in a demeaning way, but you guys have a different way of handling weaponry and stuff. And even I think
We have all these nunchucks, really.
well, I think England was talking about, or England, the UK. I think you guys were talking about banning knives, which I thought was hilarious. Being that I'm a knife fan.
We have a ban on knives, yeah, and in terms of the type of knife, you can't have a knife with a blade more than such and such, or a type of
katana sword. Can you have a?
You're not supposed to. I mean, but again, because we have, we don't have guns, but people are obsessed by these things, and they in fact make personal collections, right? So you will find, you can go to people's houses who do have katanas in their house.
I know, like that's the point. Like the reason people would have knives is usually going to be collective stuff. It's like, and
with
because they're
particular
preparing for the
types
zombie
of
apocalypse.
Yeah, particular types of people, right? You see them making videos and pretending, you know the type.
I don't know. I have a
but again,
a few
I think
knives, but I'm
there's a
not like
stipulation.
making videos and pretending. I'm not in the bushes going, wah, Tarzan.
Yeah,
style.
That'd be funny to see.
Well, I mean, I think there is a stipulation in the Constitution already, in the Second Amendment already, that says, that's talking about the type of people that should own guns.
You're talking about the well-regulated militia, right? So
yeah.
So it's like a well-regulated militia being necessary for the something. The right.
So if you wouldn't be accepted into that group, right, then I think the government's saying that perhaps you shouldn't really have a gun.
Yeah, like the interpretive question is why is that phrase there, and what is it supposed to represent? Like, so some people say that it goes down to does the federal government have the right to make laws on? I don't know, like I'll shut up. I don't know much about this stuff. I just have a general idea of the conversation.
Well, I think it's been interpreted the correct way in general from what I've seen of the States, which is, gun clubs are quite careful to have good gun practice, right? People that own guns generally, as I've understood it and seen in documentaries, etc., are generally pretty aware of how dangerous the guns are, and they're responsible owners, right? So they don't keep magazines loaded in their guns, you know what I mean, and stuff like this, or whatever.
Keep one in the chamber.
You know what I mean? I mean, I think that's the general kind of impression that I get from outside. But of course, there's always people that are a bit like the collectors of knives in this country, right? They're a little bit beyond that. They've got more of an obsessional relationship with these items. And that seems to me, where you get to cross the line between whether they would be accepted into a militia or not. Would you want?
Well, I think there are people who own guns who collect them who are also part of a military. So it's like,
right.
Well, that's fine.
Well, let's talk about owning firearms.
That's okay. They're responsible people. They've learned how to control and harness the responsibility of owning guns. And there's nothing wrong with that because that's part of the Constitution.
I was just pointing out the weird law differences that we have. It's like one state, it's like all these nitty-gritty rules about knives, or Arizona, Arizona is largely a red state, and they're like, no crossbows unless you're disabled and you can prove it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the interesting things about multiple firearms ownership is guns are kind of like tattoos, right? You get one, probably going to get another. And one of the reasons for multiple, people owning more than one is because each model offers a different experience. right? Like even variations between like AR platforms. If you chamber it in a different round, it's a much different experience than like a 7.62 AR is much different than a 5.56 AR. A 9mm handgun will give you a much different experience than say like a 45 caliber. So that's where one of the reasons why you have one person owning multiple weapons. Plus, they serve different roles, right? Like I'll carry a handgun for the defense in like a back alley, whereas like a shotgun is great for home defense because birdshot doesn't go through drywall, so I don't have to worry about accidentally hitting my kids in their bed while I'm trying to put down a home intruder. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is it wrong that I have a throwing knife?
I think it's cool that you have a throwing knife.
I also have a baseball bat behind the door. What's up with that?
Yeah, but again, it's the numbers, isn't it? I mean,
if you've ever played Dead Rising, like in the mall, I want the one hand, like the handle, the chainsaw with a handle, right? Like it's the clown uses.
I guess it depends what you think the Second Amendment is really for. I guess that's what it really comes down to, doesn't it? Whether you think it's just for, as you're saying, Jim, there to protect house and home, right? Is that the purpose of it?
I think it's to protect house and home. I also think it's there to protect community, your local community.
No, I think the original intention behind it, at the end of the day, was to make militias just in case the federal government gains too much power and decide to use that power on people. I think it was meant to be as a collective versus like as individuals. I mean, like to own that part of a militia to justify owning.
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, the rise of Napoleon in Europe was, in some sense, because he was the commander that took his troops to fire on the citizenry of Paris to put down the first revolution, or the third revolution, I think it was. So yeah, that wouldn't have been able to happen if the citizenry of Paris had been armed.
I think the problem now, though, is the game has changed so much. So it's like, okay, the whole argument to fight tyranny, I totally get, but I mean, you can try to Red Dawn if you want, but I just can't. I don't think we can. I mean, there's just so much firepower now. There's no way to fight military now. Like if
pretty well in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I completely disagree. Actually,
well,
I mean, one of the problems
for their advantage.
Both efforts with AK have been holding the U.S. off for the better part of 2 decades.
No, I completely disagree. Even with handguns, I mean, if 10 million people show up at Washington with handguns, there's no way they're going to get military to shoot on them. Absolutely no way American troops would shoot on American citizens if it was, if there was a just cause. Right? Yeah, if they turn up saying, "Give us all your gold from Fort Knox," fair enough. They're going to defend the American state, but, right? But if it's in terms of a revolution, right, then it's going to be, the American troops are going to be part of that revolution as well. Or at least some will, some won't, maybe.
The gold we no longer have.
When you analyze the political climate of combat arms jobs in the U.S. military, they'll probably be marching right along with the pissed off citizenry.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I would expect. At least enough of them to make them think twice, and it kind of means that the government can't take over the country, which is exactly what I assumed the Second Amendment was for. Right? So it does what it says on the tin.
Yep.
But you only need handguns. You only need handguns to do that, right? Because it's the numbers that really count.
Well, a lot of it too was one of the reasons why they organized the Second Amendment the way they did is because the founding fathers were desperately paranoid of maintaining a standing military. Because in their writings they maintained that it's one of the quickest paths to tyranny. Something they were obviously very concerned against because they fought a war about it. So their idea to home defense was a militia, a very small corps of professional officers organizing the local citizenry with, at the time, military-grade weapons.
Yeah.
To fight off an invader. And if it was a protracted war, you would obviously organize them into regulars instead of irregulars, so that you could mount a coordinated resistance.
So that then, go ahead.
Oh, just finish your thought, and I have another thought.
Well, it seems that like that, it certainly explains what the traditional historical sense of it is, but we're taking it further than that, aren't we? Because we're saying it's for home defense as well now, so it's for the individual, which has nothing to do with organizing against the state. And that being granted, it means that argument against the Second Amendment is irrelevant, right? Really, what the amendment says is it guarantees you as a homeowner a weapon.
Well, and consider this though too, right? Because at the time that the Second Amendment was written, the United States bordered Indian territory, and these were pissed off Indians on the losing end of the French and Indian War.
Sure.
So home defense definitely figures into that, even if tacitly.
Yeah, granted. So
Yes,
I mean,
think...
as I say, it comes down to you're granting that the individual has the right for a weapon. So really, the question is which weapon.
And besides, like I wrote on Google Plus earlier today, Trump is literally Hitler, and cops are a gang of racist, trigger-happy killers. So give them all your guns.
I think that meme is hilarious.
Well, it seems to have worked in the UK, but obviously it's a different situation. So
I have something to say about UK cops. You guys have pansy cops. I'm like,
yeah, it's true in some ways. Yeah.
No, I watched this video. With these twins. These twins that were on drugs, and they're like, I'm on drugs, and they ran across it's on YouTube somewhere. They ran across the freeway or some highway. They get hit, and the cops couldn't seem to settle these two girls down at all. And they're like, now listen, ma'am. And they're trying to be all polite and hands-offish. And these girls are like running into traffic. Eventually, like one of them gets hit by this big old truck because the cops are incompetent and it's stopping them. And I was thinking, oh man, our cops will just tackle you and be like, clearly you can't handle yourself. So tackle and handcuff and no more chasing people down the freeway.
Yeah, that's when you say freeway. I'm not sure what
highway,
you mean.
Freeway, busy road where people drive fast.
Yeah, I mean, there's laws on the motorway. You can't walk along the motorway at all, and a cop would have taken them out very fucking quickly.
No, they were like walking up to them, going like, "Ma'am."
Just because there's one video, one set of incompetent cops doesn't mean that all of them are.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound unusual that the cop wouldn't do physical violence to somebody in that situation if they, weren't completely in control. So that's, our cops can be like that, I would say. But I don't know the individual situation, and it certainly wouldn't happen on a busy road like a motorway, like what I think you mean as a freeway.
I've seen some of the stuff that the London Metropolitan Police TAC teams do for training, and they do not play.
There's a certain groups of cops that are a bit more physical, and that most, some policemen aren't like that. It's difficult to say because, like, I live in London, and one of the nearest stations to me has some of the hardest cops in the UK in it. And they don't fuck about. I mean, they will slap the shit out of you if you step out of line and say something wrong. Right, so, but they're not normal cops. They're the ones that are armed, quick response, riot police, trained.
Like our SWAT team?
Yeah, like a SWAT team, yeah.
Well, you guys had to have some cops like that, right? I mean, you had the IRA at one point going crazy. And...
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, this team were created by Thatcher to be unmarked policemen. So they used to deal with the unions. That's why they were created.
The unions?
Yeah. Well, through the strikes, Thatcher started sending in unmarked policemen.
Oh dear.
Yeah, just a few people died. A couple of miners along the way, for sure. In fact, there was I can't remember, it's about maybe 105 of them got charged by horses.
Were those unmarked cops also used against the IRA?
No, funnily enough, they weren't. They weren't, no. We had military for that. So SAS normally.
So, question from a European mindset, since you definitely probably have a different view than I do. When you look at a country like, what is the one I'm thinking of? Not Sweden, the Swiss,
France.
Switzerland.
Yeah,
they're arming everybody.
Oh, I don't. Yes.
Well, arming everybody, like there's a lot of guns there, right? So
I think so. Yeah.
It looks like they require people to be in the military, from what I'm understanding.
Yeah, Switzerland. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure once you get to a certain age, you have to serve 2 years in the service, and they give you a weapon after. Yeah.
They certainly give you weapons training. That's for sure. Everybody as well. I think men and women.
Like Switzerland's really even in need of a military. Like they're a landlocked country that border a bunch of NATO countries.
Yeah.
Quite frankly,
they've also been famous for being the most neutral country in history. You know.
Yeah, and they actually are neutral. Unlike Sweden always likes to claim that they're the neutral country, but like in reality, they really aren't.
No, of course not. They've been an ally of the States since the Second World War.
But obviously, they have a lot of access to guns, but they don't have the same culture.
I just wanted to say about Sweden, that's when they weren't, though, selling high-quality steel to the Nazis.
What? That came out of the blue.
Sorry. Well, Sweden, they actually did sell steel to the Nazis, even though they claimed to have been neutral in World War II.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't think they were. I mean, but anyway. I mean, Germany invaded Norway, so I'm pretty sure that some of Sweden fell under. Hey, I don't know. I don't know my history in that area.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Sweden kind of just spun over for them, if I remember right, but maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like Austria.
I know they allied themselves with the States during the Cold War.
Well, I didn't think we even talked for 2 hours about guns. That was interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think that was gonna...
Wow.
Yeah. This is the longest political related conversations I've ever participated in.
I was a little bit worried because I thought Skylar and Jim were gonna throw down for half a second.
By the way, earlier on, I was just... never mind, I'll shut up.
I think there is a lot of fluff around that kind of the subject itself, right? I mean, it does seem to me that the people misunderstand it quite quickly, in that as if somebody is saying there should be no guns, right? And I've never heard anybody in the States ever make that argument.
Oh, but there is one writer for the New York Times who's called for repealing the Second Amendment fully, and that's about it.
Right.
I think what should happen with the Second Amendment is for them to reappeal it, but rewrite it in such a way that it still allows people the right to own guns, but basically fix the issue of it basically saying one thing, but being up doesn't necessarily even have anything to do with what it's actually said and why it was there. It was put in the effect.
Well, I think Jim's point about the Indians kind of settles it, really. I mean, there's no way around that. I mean,
what was the point about the Indians?
That it gives the Second Amendment the protection to cover home safety.
What does that have to do with Indians?
Well, like some of the states at the time people needed guns in their homes.
Oh, okay. I guess so.
Yeah.
Not everybody was thrilled with Manifest Destiny.
I mean, at the end of the day, right? What someone could argue and say, hey, if the criminal, wasn't able to get his hands on a gun in the first place, you wouldn't need a gun to protect your family, right? So it's like
that's kind of how it is, but it's not strictly. But yeah, I mean, there's always psychopaths and stuff. But, you don't need a gun to commit that kind of crime. So if you don't need a gun to commit that kind of crime, you're not going to use a gun. That's kind of the thought of it, really.
Yeah, I just think they should just repeal it and rewrite it in such a way that it'll still allow gun ownership just fine, but set up in such a way that when it comes to regulation, you can have consistent regulation, not just for the states, but also for the federal government in terms of the policies that they make.
We should talk about owning tanks now.
Not everybody's qualified.
You're probably right. You're probably right, Odin, that it probably just needs rewriting to make it more accessible, right? You could easily write it into two parts and allow both people to have their thing, by saying, look, if you are part of a well-organized militia, then you can have these rifles and stuff. And if you're not, then these are the weapons that are prescribed for home defense,
I think
I believe in the infallibility of the Constitution. I'm an infallible. I don't think we should defend anything.
Really?
You what? You what? I'm just getting dumbfounded. What do you think, the Bible or something?
I'm talking about the Constitution.
Yeah, what do you think it is?
Dude.
Do you think it's divinely given or something?
Yes, it came down from heaven, and George Washington was like...
It's from the deist god.
Yeah.
Came down from somewhere, that's for sure.
Don't you look at, like, I mean, obviously it's
I guess this is a good argument.
The art during that time, although it's always like the divine kind of stuff.
I mean, there's like fine true of George Washington that was built by the Masons in Washington, D.C. So he's very revered to the point where, they'll probably say that he's like divine or something. I wouldn't be surprised. The irony of all this is talking and I'm playing Battlefield 4.
Yeah, I kind of worry about the founding fathers because they do smack a little bit on the religious side.
Not all of them. A good chunk of them were moderate, based on my understanding, anyways.
Well, hopefully most of them were deists, but
a good chunk of them, they were Masons. Some of them were with the church. Even the ones with the church, some of them were Masons. I mean, they didn't come out as atheists, but...
Oh, hang on. Masons aren't atheists.
No, Masons are theists usually.
Yeah, they're theists.
Yeah.
Even though there's a hidden atheist in there all the time.
Well, there's a modern, in the modern world, it might be different, right? They accepted atheists in the whatever 1940s or 50s or something. I don't know.
And then like it seems like no one gets past like level 3 or whatever.
Yeah, and it's only certain places that'll accept you as a Mason if you're an atheist.
Out of curiosity, because we talk a lot about genders and stuff like that, you and I have in the past. And we've talked about kind of letting boys be boys in their boys club. What do you make of the Masons being all men? I mean, obviously they have the women's like Eastern Star, you know, things like that I've seen, but what really is the benefit of doing all same gender to you?
Who's that to?
To you, because I believe either you were part of Masons or you had family there.
Yeah, I got family that used to run a lodge. Yeah, I don't know. It's not like that anymore. Of course, it's a social club nowadays. So,
Well, that's
and a charity. It kind of changed in the 70s.
Catholics disagree strongly.
Okay.
Freemasons are just like evil. That's what that's what I would. That's largely how I was like raised. It's like the Freemasons are kind of like the bane of the existence of the Catholic Church because they keep infiltrating them and like screwing with the doctrines.
Are you Catholic, Frank?
I was raised Catholic.
Via the Jesuits.
And the Freemasons do just that's largely what I was taught growing up with regards to the Freemasons.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that's the mind. I'm clear that I'm not saying that's what is in fact the case. I was describing the Catholic view, specifically my upbringing view of the Freemasons.
Yeah. You know, it tends to be a Northern Europe kind of thing. Masonry. It actually started in France in the can't remember now, 1400s maybe.
Yeah, I was researching it a while ago, but I just got bored.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, you know. But you know, it's nothing to do with that. It's just a social club, really.
It doesn't seem transparent. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the whole secret societies, right?
Yeah, it's a secret society. So.
And when something's not transparent, whether it's the Masons or Scientology, it does kind of raise an eyebrow.
The minute you say that it's just a social club becomes like, well, it's not transparent, so you can't really say that. It's like,
right, exactly.
It's very transparent these days, and it comes from obviously gilded trade, right? Which is by its very nature secretive. I mean, that was the point of it. So yeah, it comes from Masons who obviously wished to hide their secrets and had secret handshakes so they could know whether you were to be paid or not. Things like that. It's a union work, right? Those that are in, some that aren't. So, you know, it comes from that background. So that's where all the rumors come from. But in the modern era, I mean, it's not like that because we don't have unions like that anymore. We haven't done for, again, since the 70s at least. So yeah, you can go online and read all about all of the practices that you need to be a Mason. Lodges are very open. They advertise online, you know.
Hey, Jimmy, you still around?
You want to go and join one, you can go and join one.
I am. I'll be right back.
I was wondering why you were being silent.
So yeah, I mean, the conspiracy stuff doesn't particularly interest me too much, although there was definitely a period where, you know, aristocracy used it.
There was a situation where somebody ticked off Masons, and you and I want to say Mark or somebody said something real creepy to me, like just an outsider, and it was like, see if someone will greet you or something the next day, or it was something really weird, like basically that see if your brother won't turn your back on you kind of thing. It was like this like veiled threat sort of thing, and I don't remember. I wish I remembered the phrasing exactly, but like it wasn't just you that said it, and I was like, oh geez.
Yeah, I think I might have been trolling a little bit. I know Mark and I were trolling on it one time because Commando was really getting
Commando. That's what it was.
It was Commando and Rodney, and they were both really like, seriously, it's a conspiracy. Oh, the Freemasons. ... They did this in history. They did that in history. You know.
Where's Commando?
Really like that.
Yeah, I never really got like the only I don't think it's I question. It's probably true. They infiltrate the Catholic Church in the sense that you have priests who don't say that they're Masons whilst being Masons. As I understand it, Masons view themselves as like it doesn't matter what religion you are when you become a Mason or something like that. And that's the sort of the like
No.
that's the idea that I
Not
think
really.
No, you have to be Abrahamic.
Do you?
I mean, this is in the past. I mean, we're not talking about now, Frank. Right? We're talking about the past, when all this conspiracy shit allegedly was going on. Right?
Yeah.
You have to have a book.
The history.
You have to have a book to swear on, otherwise you can't be a Mason.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I mean,
yeah. Okay, that's that's what I'm getting it from. But I think that would include like the sutras or something like that.
No, only in the modern era.
No.
Again, in the past era, it could only be the Torah, the Quran, or the Bible.
Okay, so like
Jade
even then,
says-
Catholics would object to that, right? So like a Catholic would say that like that's not how Christianity works in their view. It's a what's the religious term? Exclusivism or something like it has to do with the approach to the. Let me look it up.
Certainly isn't universal. What does Jade say?
Jade
She's very
says-
knowledgeable.
Jade says Catholics were forbidden to join secret societies, which sounds about right.
Yeah, yeah.
It tends to be a Northern Europe thing. It really does. Protestant, really.
I mean, I think for me, like on an outsider and not like extreme conspiracists or anything like that, but I think I know that rituals cause a psychological connection, and not necessarily spiritual, but a psychological connection, and even groups that are satanic, they do rituals not just for the show, but there's a psychological connection that it causes, and there's rituals in the Masons, and there's rituals in what's the other one with the funny hats? Shriners. You know, Bezes are cool, man. But these rituals, I think, instill something, and I'm always concerned about what I'm instilling. What rituals am I putting inside my brain? And so, like, when something doesn't feel transparent to me and it has rituals, I get real concerned, sort of like Scientology or Jehovah's Witnesses, or, you know, like I do think that there's a reason why rituals are done, and Masons do partake in them.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, at least from what I read, because that's something that I read into a lot, because I was always curious as to why they even exist. And Simos is correct in that they were, the whole thing basically came together because they were literally just a bunch of Masons who had trade secrets, and they essentially formed the organization to, you know, make sure that they get paid and get, you know, consistently get work and stuff like that. But at some point it got hijacked by a particular group of people, and so it just basically radically like spread in terms of being associated with the Abrahamic faith. There is truth to that, but they don't necessarily worship God or anything like that. It's more, you know, the whole knowledge bringer thing. He's who you should worship.
Yeah, again, it depends what era you're talking about there, particularly. But also, it should be worth mentioning that there are different types of Freemasons. So the Scottish Rite Masons, and then there's the Masonry, kind of the rest of the Protestant world, basically.
There was a couple.
That's also, most of the conspiracy stuff is to do with the right stuff, which is more to do with the aristocracy and how it got taken over, and not so much to do with the original rituals that were to do with, you know, A, knowing about Masonry, and then B, having the latest password or sign that you could get into the building site, you know, with.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't
those kind of symbols and shaky legs and all this kind of wearing. Most of that comes from that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the lodges, and they disagreed on certain things. I mean, there were points where some of them disagreed as to what it meant to be a Freemason. You know, the guy who started the Illuminati, the guy was a Mason, um, and he had disagreements in terms of what it means to be a Mason. And you know, his fellow Masons who agreed with him decided to start their own thing, and you know, there goes that, right? Um, I don't remember off the top of my head at what points throughout history where they had like a really bad and terrible effect on a society.
I can't think of one, to be honest, but I've looked at it myself, but I can't think of one. There's maybe a couple of times when the aristocracy did things that were maybe considered bad, but that's more the aristocracy.
Yeah.
Not so much the Masons.
Yeah, like, but if you take like, you know, some members, especially ones who are affiliated with the Illuminati, then you know, Napoleon, for example, right? What started revolution?
I'm not certain when we start using the word Illuminati what we're talking about, to be honest.
Secret Society had pretty much the same ideals as Freemasons, but they're just more radical.
I you know, I look at the Jade is here, by the way, Holy Speckle. If you could possibly
sure. Gotcha, Jade. Hang on one second.
Thanks.
Guys, I'm gonna go.
Yeah,
nice
secret societies that are more radical. Well, that assumes that you know, that the Freemasons have this kind of rebellious thing which could be more radical. I mean, I don't look at it that way. I look at Freemasonry as more of a humanistic attitude towards the religion. So if they're more radical than humanists, then okay.
No, I mean, it depends, right? Because they do have certain beliefs that some people might look at as being crazy, right? It's just
like
how
what?
you, like for example, they don't. At least some Masons, they don't believe in. They don't. They know they would acknowledge that God exists, but they don't acknowledge God in the way that how a Christian would acknowledge God, right? They prefer knowledge and understanding of things, and so that's they would worship the entity that brings forth that. And
I don't know, Dean. I disagree. I mean, I disagree.
look at
They would use something like render to Caesar what is Caesar's as their justification for trying to understand the ways of the material world.
Yeah, but if you look at the symbolism that they use, for example, a lot of the symbolism stem from or is based on shedding light, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't see, for example, they never read the Bible and that saw it as, you know, the devil was some form of like a literal snake or anything like that. He was a being of light who was very bracing in his nature. Yeah, they didn't read.
No, Jesus was the light.
No, but that's my point. Jesus wasn't the one in the garden that convinced Adam and Eve to eat the fruit. So,
right.
And not only that, Lucifer it's another way of saying the shining one, right?
Okay. That's
what I'm saying.
Sure.
Let's depends.
Sorry, go ahead.
But that's what I'm saying, right? It depends on the Mason, and some of them they interpret things differently, and because of that, you'll have disagreements among them. And as a result, you'll get like these factions, and it just so happens that one of these factions are the Illuminati.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, at least anyway. Jade.
The Illuminati is a faction of the Masons?
Well,
I mean, they're not
group.
Freemasons in the traditional sense of what it means to be a Freemason.
No, the Illuminati go way back to, is it Bavaria or Bohemia?
That's the story.
Whether it's true or not, that's actually well known. There are records.
Eesh. Yes. Ugh.
Oh, geez. Here we go.
Oh, I don't know. Are there really? Are there really actually records?
Yeah, there are.
Oh, damn.
I don't know.
Is it spelled with an I or a US?
Yeah, Illuminati. Well, yeah, the Illuminati hasn't existed for a couple hundred years at least.
Oh, right, that one.
Bavarian.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. No. Fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
It's Bavarian, I think. Yeah, Bavarian group, because but the term Illuminati has since been taken to mean all sorts of things.
The best
it
one
actually says it actually, I think it still says on my Facebook page that I work for the Illuminati.
Fantastic.
I like how people were saying that Katy Perry's thing was about the Illuminati when she sang at the Super Bowl, and when she came out on the big giant Egyptian cat, and they're like, "Oh, Illuminati! It's clearly." And then the More You Know star came out, and she was like,
God.
"Yeah," and they're like, "Yeah, this is all Illuminati." And I'm like, "Yeah," and the dancing hot dogs too, and she looked like she was on a hot dog and the stick and the, and the dancing sharks and stuff. Is that
Bavaria.
Illuminati?
Yeah, Bavaria sausages.
Yeah,
Oh
there
gosh.
you go. Bavaria sausages. It's got to be Illuminati. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I read the book in the 70s. Did you read that, Jade?
Oh, the novel in 3 parts?
Yeah, the Illuminatus trilogy.
Yes, that's great, isn't it? Do you know that
fun.
people I read it back in the 70s too, and there were people who thought that was real.
Indeed. And this is where I think it all comes from, right? This is why everybody keeps bringing it up.
I agree with you. I think it's a novel. It's a very good novel. At least I remember it. I haven't read it in a long time. I still have it. I'll have to pull it out and remember. But it's called the Illuminatus trilogy, I think. Illuminatus, not Illuminati.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Illuminatus.
Illuminatus trilogy. And I have it in one big book, but it is a trilogy. And it's written as if it was real. And during the 70s, because the 70s was a crazy time anyway. I mean, 70s was a lot of fun in some ways, but it was also really crazy. People were believing in all sorts of really interesting things. Cults were running rampant. I could spend a long time talking to you about that. But you think people are wooish today? Back then, I mean, they really wooish. People were throwing off the old traditions and grabbing onto anything you could think of. But
well, let me just interrupt there and just say that.
Okay, go ahead.
The Illuminatus trilogy. I'll give it a spoiler alert. Shut down now. It ends up with Nazis from Atlantis.
Yeah. Yep. So you've
just to show you how woo we can go with this. The Illuminatis are Nazis from Atlantis.
Right. And so but I do agree with you. I think that sparked the whole interest in the Illuminati and conspiracies and is this real? And at that time, there were people really looking for Atlantis and really believing in Atlantis. And that was one of the things that just fit into the woo. From my point of view, and from a lot of people's point of view that I knew, all this stuff was fun. Atlantis is real. Of course it's real. Oh, astrology. Yes, astrology is so much fun. But most people I know didn't take any of that seriously. Or primal scream therapy. I don't know if anybody, remember that one. That was fun. Yeah, basically it was you got to scream your emotions out or whatever, but that was fun. And all kinds of stuff like that. Esalen Institute, all the sort of crazy stuff that happened. And some of it wasn't so crazy. Huh?
I know you did. You do firewalking, Jade, in the 70s?
No, I didn't.
No. Okay.
I figured with my luck, let's put it this way. Today I was outside working, and there was this broken bottle. It broke into 1 million pieces. Some big pieces, some little pieces. I'm really proud of myself. I really am. I managed to pick up every single piece of that glass and not cut myself.
Ooh.
Now, for me, that's an accomplishment. So as you can imagine, I'm not the sort of person who would go firewalking. Because without fail, I'd get burned. So no, I
would
didn't do it.
The broom myself, but okay.
Yeah. But no, that was a big thing too. People firewalking and see, a lot of it was fun. I mean, it really was, especially since a lot of people didn't take it seriously, but some people took it dead serious, you know.
So you're saying
Well,
that. So are you guys saying that the suspicion that a lot of people have in regards to the Freemasons and the Illuminati stems from that book? I mean,
yeah,
I would
No,
think.
yeah, well,
I
the
am.
Illuminati specifically, there's always been suspicion about the Freemasons because they were so secretive. And there were
Yeah,
people
but
who like to yank your chain, even like back in the 1940s, and write about the strange things that went on in the Freemasons and make it up because it was fun. Because there were trolls back then too. They were just different kind of trolls.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think the Illuminati exists anyways in this time. I mean, unless you might find a small group of people who might ascribe themselves to that kind of thinking or ideology.
No, you will now
But in
because people
terms of
start talking.
their, but I think that in terms of their effect, back in the past when they were prominent, they did have real effects. I mean, even the Freemasons have real effects, particularly in the United States. I mean,
Well, as a
Washington D.C.
union,
is
yeah,
covered in,
sure.
yeah, like, what do you mean as a union?
Well, that's the point of it, isn't it? It's to get together as a collective to
Right.
express power in society that you wouldn't have it individually.
Yeah,
That's
but
what
a lot of
that's what
Masons,
unions do.
yeah, but a lot of members, they weren't just in it for that, and that's it, and that's obvious. A lot of them wrote books, a lot of them wrote letters that express their beliefs and their practices, and it wasn't just, being in the union and that's it.
I don't think you would. It was generally. I mean, I don't know for certain, but it generally wasn't. It's not good etiquette for Masons to express their individual beliefs. I don't know whether that's something that I know because I've been told it, but
Well, at one time it was basically just the in thing. Most look at the founding fathers of the United States. When you get some of these good Christians talking about how wonderful all the Christians were that founded the United States, they ignore the fact that many of them were Freemasons, including George
Yeah,
Washington.
a ton of them
They
were
just
Freemasons.
ignore that. But that's because that was just what gentlemen of that class did. It wasn't a
it's commitment towards
that,
the Enlightenment in that case.
yeah, it was, yes, exactly.
At
It
that
was an
particular
Enlightenment
time, yeah.
right at that particular time. So it's not a particularly meaningful thing in and of itself. But I do find it curious how they really avoid mentioning that.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the connections to atheism, I think that's the real reason that it gets kind of suppressed in the States, right? Because, there was a real connection with gentlemen and intellectuals of the time, working through ideas of the Enlightenment towards atheism.
Right, and the Enlightenment even had temples of, at least in France, I think. I don't know about in
France,
England.
yeah.
I think in France they had, didn't they have temples to knowledge or something like that?
Reason, I think, is the one.
Temples to reason. There we go. Temples to reason.
A temple, yeah. I mean,
or a temple. It was only but it only one. I thought there was more than one. But anyway, so people take these things and they take them out of context and misconstrue them. But we don't hear a lot in this country. It isn't taught a lot that a lot of our laws, our Constitution comes from Enlightenment principles.
Oh yeah, they did. I mean, Washington D.C. is riddled. It's pretty much made up of Freemasonry, like designs and
yes,
thinking.
And
like,
so's our dollar bill.
Over.
So's our dollar bill, because everybody at the time that this all started was a Freemason. And that tends to be ignored because it's uncomfortable. I went to Catholic schools, so we got the whole thing. They didn't, yeah, it's Enlightenment. Here's what the Enlightenment was. And I'm not saying all schools are like that. Believe me, I'm not. But I do know from talking to people that a lot are very unaware of the influence the Enlightenment had on our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. They're also often ignorant about the effect the Iroquois Confederacy had on the founding of our government. But those are the things that are left out.
Where do they think the Statue of Liberty comes from?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
You know, um,
No, I
But
and
mean,
the
yeah,
if there's
pseudo
anything,
and the pseudo classical romanticism of all the buildings in
indeed, yeah.
Washington D.C., including the Washington Monument. You know, this is all it just the architecture
Yeah,
is
and you would think, you know, because of the scale they're done on,
Yeah.
they would be the best examples, right? And they are, right? They are literally the best examples. They've got all of the great classical kind of features done on a scale hitherto unseen.
right. Well,
And
even
yet
in the
they
well,
don't
is it
get
in the
recognized as such, you know.
is it the Capitol building that has all those paintings, including I think Muhammad?
Yeah, yeah.
But there's some, you know, it's all these, you know, great thinkers that, you know, it's
Yeah. But it should be some of the greatest buildings ever built. I mean, that's
Yeah.
DC is.
I was actually a little bit glad that it all got burned down in 1812 because this is what we got.
I see.
We got much better architecture after that.
Thank you, Canada.
Yeah, thank you, Canada. You improved our architecture.
I mean, there
Also
are a
gave
couple
us. I was also going to say gave us one of the somewhat unsung heroes of that era, who was, of course, Dolly Madison. Dolly Madison stayed at the Capitol, and this is quite literally. And what she did was she got all the servants and the slaves. They had slaves at that time, and anybody who stuck around, let's put it that way, to save all the to save everything they could, the paintings, the furniture, everything. And she stayed till the very last minute. The wagons were literally going out the back way as the Canadians were, and the British were coming in the front door. And she stayed to save all of those things. We still have the Declaration of Independence. I think it was the Declaration of Independence we still have because Dolly Madison managed to sneak it out the back.
Yep.
Talk about courage. I mean, wow. I mean, I know, you know, at that time it was not, you know, women were relatively safe, but when people start shooting, nobody's safe. So that's kind of an amazing story in itself to me. And then, of course, they burned everything down. Thank you. I know it's kind of funny, but like, thank you, Canada.
Simos is polite.
Yeah, I prefer the architecture we have now. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah.
Shouldn't have built the first one of wood anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
So I am going to kill this hangout in about 10 minutes just because I work early tomorrow, but just to give you guys fair warning. But I didn't expect to talk about guns the whole time.
Yeah, that's I'm
sorry about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that people should talk about what they want to talk about, what they feel they need to talk about. Just a subject at the moment I don't want to discuss.
I know a lot of people are raw, and
yeah,
it seems like people snap pretty easy on it.
Yeah, and it's just a difficult thing to deal with. The only thing I wanted to say is Spackle Dianne Feinstein does not want to take all guns away.
I've seen her that's been pretty extreme though, and there was one where she was talking, she was handling the gun, and I'm just like, what are you doing with that gun? Put it down.
But her positions on guns and gun control are very well established. She does not want to take away all guns. But she has a history, you know, with weapons and assassinations and some understanding of that. So
yes, she wants to be protected, but she doesn't want the average person to be. Yeah, got it.
No, she doesn't feel that way at all. Her concerns are, if you look at her positions and look at her votes, her concerns are automatic weapons, high-powered type of ammunition. And actually, here, hang on. Let me give you this. There we go. There's a link. Oh. I have a shotgun in my home. Feinstein has no problem with that. I don't agree with her on everything, but yeah, she doesn't. Her biggest concern are, and that link will give you her, like her votes and reasoning. But it's a just kind of an overview. But yeah, she doesn't want to take everybody's guns away. I think a lot of times people who, well, and it's not just with Feinstein, with everybody on whatever side of an issue, tend to not really look up the person's votes and their actually stated positions on things. Easy to do. Most of us don't follow C-SPAN religiously.
I actually like C-SPAN.
They have some good programs on there too.
Mm-hmm. The discussions seem they feel more organic and they feel less guided versus watching something on Fox or CNN or MSNBC or whatever.
Don't they do like interviews with authors and stuff?
I think so. I know they have certain programs.
Every now and then.
It's nice. They've had some programs on the founding of this country and things like that. And it's very interesting.
I think I've seen a few of their programs. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course you can watch people argue about votes and things like that. That kind of gets bogged down because politics can be a very slow process. I've been in things like that. Dear God. I can remember arguing for 40 minutes on a point of order once. Oh God. That gets tedious.
What I find it a lot of like political commentators talking about a blue wave, and I'm like, a blue wave in what sense? To the Senate? Because there's not much.
Well, so far, and this is just so far.
Hold on.
Been winning.
One quick thing.
Winning special elections in very heavy Republican areas. It just won one in Kentucky, in a place that had a 72% vote for, I think 72% for Trump, and situation so poorly. Now things could change. We know that. That's politics. Things could change. But right now, even conservatives are not happy with the Republican Party. And that, again, another thing that could change it is Mitt Romney is getting back into the game.
Oh boy, I know.
And that, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Mitt Romney, but he's not a nutter. There is some chance he could steer the party back to a more reasonable position. Of course, he may not. He's not his dad, unfortunately. He's not his dad, unfortunately. I tend to refer to him as the lesser Romney.
See, my thing is, what I'm looking at is are the seats that are going to be up for and it doesn't seem like there's a ton of that are red that are going to be up for grabs. I mean, most of the ones that are up, they're pretty safe red states.
Well, that's what they thought about the votes so far that are going blue.
Yeah.
Also, there are some very good candidates in some of these red states that are Democrats. that are not
Yeah,
moderate Democrats. And so this is going to be very interesting. And don't
yeah, but
forget some of the really powerful people who have been getting voted in again and again and again in Republican states are not running again.
oh yeah, that I
And that
definitely
makes it,
know. Yeah, but
and
irregardless, I think like take for example in Utah, right? I mean, is running in
Utah's,
Utah. And there's Utah is, you know, there. I guess you could consider it a red state, but there hasn't been any Democratic like person that, or even an that is announced happening in Utah.
yeah, but Utah's a somewhat different situation than most other states
Yeah,
because of the
absolutely.
large Mormon population.
Is Mitt Romney Mormon?
Yeah,
Yes.
he is. Romney is.
Yeah.
I am gonna go ahead and move this to an off air.
Okay.
And so I thank you all for joining, and I'm sorry, Jade, that you made it so late.
That's okay. That's
and
okay. No problem.
I have a special ending.
What's your special
Oh,
ending?
you do?
Yeah, are you ready to hit the button?
No,
Right.
I'm waiting for your special ending.
Okay, everybody, go love yourself.
Mm.
Now that has more than
Love
one meaning.
Mm.